Chapter 14:14. While the two were bickering, the last part of the journey came. Lord Song stopped when they were a few months away from Joseon. As they moved forward, the number of Heaven's Choice cultivators gradually increased, and they would no longer be able to conceal their approach. Everyone left the space of the tree and reluctantly said their goodbyes. This was their last goodbye. They had experienced it many times before, but they still felt sad, because a group operation like this would probably not happen again in the future. Lu Xiaoyi said to Long Xing, "If you want to return to Heaven's Choice, the best way is to follow the immemorial beast through the ancient beast passage. Pay attention to the changes in the Battle of Joseon that might affect your situation. The path of cultivation is difficult. Take care." The Marshall Saint Training Hall had their own thoughts, and they were different from others. This was the privacy of every orthodoxy and could not be described in detail. The immemorial beasts came to say goodbye. They did not mind, because they had a long lifespan, and because Lu Xiaoyi would definitely enter Heaven's Choice again and go through the ancient beast passage. Next time you come to Heaven's Choice, don't pretend to be mysterious. We will prepare the most honorable welcome ceremony for you among the immemorial beasts, and there will be the most beautiful snake lady in the beast territory. Lu Xiaoyi had to reject the immemorial beast's good intentions, and reminded them, especially pay attention to your relationship with the dragon race, is the key to whether you can get along well with the sacred beasts. In the end, there were only 2 people and a cat left in the sky. As for little Meow, the two did not deliberately drive it away. First of all, this little guy had nowhere else to go. It had been a lonely cat for a long time, and had already let its heart go wild after coming out for so many years. It really wanted to see the changes in the human cultivation world. Little Meow had its own unique ability, and this ability could sometimes provide help to the two, so they just let it be. They cupped their hands at the tree, and the 3 figures disappeared into the vast universe. Lu Xiaoyi naturally flew behind Qing Xian, and little Meow followed behind Lu Xiaoyi with ease. Qing Xian found that no matter how fast or slow it was, it could not change the nature of its lead, and it was a little annoyed. "You two shameless things, do you think it's my business alone to barge in?" Lu Xiaoyi remained silent. Little Meow shut her lips tightly, and Qing Xian's long face fell as they stopped their escape. This was because there was already a hazy fluctuation of spiritual vigor in front of them. This meant that they had already reached the alert area of the Joseon battlefield. If they continued to move forward, it would be difficult for them to not reveal their whereabouts. Lu Xiaoyi grabbed Meow Meow behind him. "Meow Meow, it's time for you to do something. Come and take a look. See clearly what's up ahead." Little Meow's face was bitter. "Senior brother, I can't see that far. Joseon definitely can't see that far. He can only see a little further than you guys, so he can roughly distinguish the distribution of spiritual vigor in front. To be able to see further than them, this was a skill." Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian were the top choices among the Yin Spirit Supremes of the same level. Lu Xiaoyi was now able to fight against the Primordial Spirit Supremes, and he could also deal with the Yang Spirit. Qing Xian was slightly weaker, but not by much. Their spiritual power was outstanding among the cultivators of the same level. So little Meow said that they could see further than them. This was not an ordinary supernatural power. At least in terms of depth of vision, they had already reached the level of the Yang Spirit. Heaven did not give it abnormal combat power, but gave it a certain amount of compensation in other aspects. In fact, neither Lu Xiaoyi nor Qing Xian intended to sneak in. This was too unreliable. The cultivator legions had always attached great importance to their own protection. The sentries and guerrilla scouts they sent out must have a set of strict distinguishing systems. Moreover, it must be a multi-layered distinguishing system that came from the hands of the Yang Spirit. It was very difficult to impersonate them through questioning, soul-searching, or other self-righteous methods. You might think that you have been able to pass off fish eyes as pearls, but in fact, everything was under the surveillance of others. By the time you finally reacted, you would have already fallen into an inescapable net and would not be able to escape even if you had wings. Regarding this, the five-ring cultivators had already done it to the extreme. The system of natural selection might not be as professional as the five-ring cultivators, but it would not be too bad. It was completely uncontrollable. The sentry post would be filled with layers and layers of questions. After passing through one level, there would be another. In the end, it was almost inevitable that they would be intercepted. Therefore, the two of them were actually very consistent in their opinions, forced their way through. As long as they were fast enough, as long as they could distinguish the fluctuations of the opponent's breath in front of them and avoid the densest areas, it was impossible to completely cover the entrance and exit of such a large upper realm of Joseon. Especially with Little Meow's long-range eye of truth, they had the possibility of changing directions in advance. With their abnormal speed, it was not difficult for them to break into the chessboard of heaven and earth. What made the two of them uncertain was the change after entering the chessboard of heaven and earth. Was it a one-person game? Or a three-person game? Or did they break into someone else's game? They each had the sex talisman of carefree travel and Taishian Zhonghuang on them. The chessboard of heaven and earth should not have mistaken them for someone else, right? They would not consider things that could not be predicted. Breaking into a certain game was their goal. When they reached it, they would naturally find out. They were not important people. Joseon would not open up a passage for them alone. It was also unrealistic. Lu Xiaoyi put Little Meow on Qing Xian's shoulder. This way, Qing Xian could share the eye of truth with Little Meow. He only needed to follow Qing Xian. The two of them could not share the eye of truth. Otherwise, with their different temperaments and ways of doing things, they would not be able to persuade each other to go their separate ways. Between the two of them, Lu Xiaoyi's speed was faster. Therefore, he could only follow while Qing Xian led the way. If it was another person, Qing Xian might not be able to keep up with them. Qing Xian specially reminded Little Meow, "Little Meow, after we reach Zhou Xian's boundary, I will put you into the spirit beast pouch. Be careful not to resist." Little Meow nodded obediently. This was to prevent the chessboard of heaven and earth from separating the cat and human after entering it. If they were placed into different games, with Little Meow's ordinary yuaning ability, it would most likely be a disaster. When everything was ready, Qing Xian and Little Meow shared their vision. They had a rough judgment of the distribution of the scouts in front of them. With a flash of their bodies, they aimed at the huge gap between the heaven's chosen people and went in. Lu Xiaoyi followed closely behind. With this kind of penetration, as long as the route was chosen appropriately, it would not even alarm the other party. This was because the arrangement of the heaven's chosen people would not be able to form some kind of airtight seal over a distance of a few months. They relied on judgment, courage, and adaptability. In this point, Qing Xian had no problem. After a month, there was finally a heaven's chosen cultivator who noticed the three of them flashing past. Therefore, the alarm was sent out, and the surrounding interception system began to move. The real test had arrived. Lu Xiaoyi was making sarcastic remarks at the back. "Run faster, cow nose. Do you believe that I won't kick your butt if you dilly-dally?" Chapter 14-15. Joseon's heaven and earth chessboard had never stopped since it started 70 years ago. Counting the three innate spiritual treasures in the dozens of universes around Joseon, the heaven and earth chessboard was ranked first in terms of realm aura. This was also one of the important reasons why the upper realm of Joseon would merge with the heaven and earth chessboard. The heaven and earth chessboard's functions were abnormally powerful, but the price was that it lost the development of a deeper level of self-intelligence. Instead, it was replaced by various chessboard rules, faintly forming a small heavenly Tao under the heaven and earth chessboard. Such a level could no longer be categorized using the human realm. If one had to find a standard, it would be between the half-immortal realm and the celestial realm. As the celestial realm and the celestial realm were deeply integrated with each other, all attacks on the celestial realm will be distributed to every piece of land in the celestial realm. Even if the Heaven's Choice army covered the entire place and attacked at the same time, they wouldn't be able to shake the heaven and earth chessboard in the slightest. They couldn't help but fall into an endless and never-ending game. Using spells could not cause any substantial damage to Joseon, so the Heaven's Choice people could only break through this unsolvable chessboard formation through human means. They broke through it one by one. However, the Heaven and Earth chessboard was not unsolvable. There was nothing in the cultivation world that was unsolvable. The people of Joseon could choose different chess games to deal with the enemy before they arrived, but the condition was that once they chose, they would not have the chance to change it. For example, the people of Joseon could choose one game to decide victory or defeat, regardless of whether it was a small chess game, a medium-sized chess game, or a super large-scale chess game that involved everyone. However, for the people of Joseon who focused on dragging things out, they would not choose such a method. Deciding victory or defeat in one game was meaningless to the people of Joseon, because if the attacking side lost, they could start all over again after a period of time. Under the absolute suppression of numbers and numbers, there would be a game where they would collapse sooner or later, so they could not choose that. They could also choose to rely on the countless small chess games of the various sections. However, no matter how many sects there were in Joseon, they could not be more than the Heaven's Choice continent, and it was not conducive to the gathering of elite forces. Therefore, in this domain attack and defense battle, the people of Joseon had chosen the most resilient way of defending their continents. In the Joseon Upper Realm, there were 3,000 continents of various sizes. Each continent was a game, and the success or failure of an attack or defense was determined by the number of victories. This was a grand strategy, and there were countless small details involved. Simply put, the entire attack and defense was split into 9 stages. With the 9 upper sects of Joseon as the foundation, each sect would defend one round. If Heaven's Chosen could defeat all 9 rounds, the Heaven and Earth chessboard would release its restrictions to break through the defense. If he couldn't open it, he wouldn't accept any challenges for 1,000 years. Before each big game, there were 330 small games, which corresponded to the 330 little lands that the 9 upper sects of Joseon commanded. The first game of Joseon's defense was Wan Yan's creation, and the order of attack was like this. At the same time, Wan Yan's creation would start with 330 small games. If Heaven's Chosen could obtain a 60% chance of victory in these 330 small games, then they would automatically obtain the qualifications to start a big game with Wan Yan's creation. If Wan Yan's creation lost, Heaven's Chosen would obtain the first big game victory, and they could continue to challenge the next one. The Huangting Taoism's chess game would still start from the 330 small games under the Huangting Taoism, and continue to move forward bit by bit. In order to show fairness, all the cultivators of Joseon who participated in the attack and defense battle of Wan Yan's creation would not be able to participate in the subsequent chess battles after they lost. Similarly, if Heaven's Chosen cultivators lost a game in the big game, then all the cultivators who participated and survived could become scouts, because they would no longer be allowed to enter the Heaven and Earth chessboard again. Only the victors could continue. This was the principle. This was a very time-consuming chess game, like an old cow pulling a broken chariot. Many small games would last for several years, or even longer, until one side had a 60% chance of winning. And the big game of Wan Yan's creation lasted for 10 years. Although Heaven's Chosen won in the end, they were also exhausted. In 70 years, Heaven's Chosen had passed a total of 4 obstacles: Wan Yan's creation, Huangting Taoism, human sect, and 10,000 Buddhas worshipping the heavens. In these 4 games, not only did Joseon lose, Heaven's Chosen lost even more. Just from the start of the 330 games, there were countless cultivators who lost and were disqualified. Not only did this include the small sects of Joseon's 3,000 small continents, but it also included the small sects affiliated to Heaven's Choice. In the big game, Huangting Taoism won 1 game, human sect won 1 game, and 10,000 Buddhas worshipping the heavens won 3 games in a row. Just these 5 games made a large number of cultivators of Heaven's Choice unable to continue fighting. It was only until the 3rd game of 10,000 Buddhas that Heaven's Choice managed to win with great difficulty, but their losses were also huge. If one were to calculate carefully, Zhou Xian didn't suffer too big of a loss. Instead, to a certain extent, they had a certain advantage. It was just that Heaven's Choice was bigger in size, so Heaven's Choice could still afford this loss. The most important thing was that they could continue to continuously transfer manpower from Heaven's Choice, which was the most important thing. The fifth game was Carefree Travel. Carefree Travel's 330 small games were very good. They won 3 times in a row, making a large number of Heaven's Choice cultivators disqualified. Only then did it reach the big game of Carefree Travel's main sect. But in the big game, they were somewhat stretched, because they played some tricks. In the previous small games, they sent out a large number of Yuanian cultivators and God-perfected monarchs to support the small and medium-sized sects under Carefree Travel. This indeed played a big role, making the tens of thousands of Heaven's Choice cultivators who participated in the 3 small games to withdraw. But in the 4th game, the Yuanian and perfected monarchs they sent out were also disqualified because of defeat. In other words, in the main game of Carefree Travel, they didn't have enough manpower. Carefree Travel was mobilizing the sect's strength. Of course, there were also some helpers from Qingwei Immortal Sect and Primeval Cave. Everyone was now on the same boat, and they were also fighting a realm war, not just for one sect or another. The core principle was that if the probability of failure increased greatly due to insufficient manpower, then it was better not to fight, so as to avoid wasting a large number of experts and disqualifying them. Among the remaining sects, the most powerful Buddhist sect, Bitter Zen Temple, was unable to participate in the Taoist game because of the disharmony of their orthodoxy. Taishan Middle Yellow was the same as Carefree Travel. Their strength was mediocre, and it was difficult for them to maintain their own game, not to mention other sections. The only ones who could lend a helping hand were the 2 most powerful sects, Qingwei Immortal Sect and Primeval Cave. While they met the requirements for the number of people in their own game, they still had some surplus, so they sent all of them to Carefree Travel. They only had one goal, and that was to at least win the big game. In this way, at least 1 or 2 Heaven's Choice cultivators would withdraw from the realm war, and the pressure on them would be reduced by a lot. Therefore, this time's Carefree Travel game was actually participated by 3 sects, with Carefree Travel as the main force. It was a test of the coordination ability of the chess players. Junior Sister Kawa, you've performed outstandingly in the previous few small games, so the sect has decided that you'll be in charge of the big game this time. How about it? Are you confident? Many people were worried that Bai Mei would hand over the most important task to a new master who did not have enough qualifications and experience. But he stood his ground against the objections of the masses. He strongly recommended her, because this junior sister was courageous. And in addition to being cautious, she did not lack boldness and shrewdness. Carefree Travel needed a player who dared to take risks. Otherwise, this time's Carefree Travel game would not bode well for them. Chapter 14:16. Kawa will do my best. I won't disappoint the sect. Kawa didn't hesitate at all. She had been sharpening herself for 70 years. Previously, she went to Wanyan, Huangting, Human Sect, and even Thousand Buddha's Imperial Palace to observe how the other sect masters arrange a chessboard, how they change between attack and defense, how they set up traps, how they learn from each other's strengths to make up for their weaknesses, how they struggle before death, and how they rob Peter to pay Paul. Not only did she look at the deployment skills of her own people, but she also looked at the preferences of the Heaven's chosen people. When it was her turn, she had an outstanding record of winning 330 games in a row. In fact, because the Carefree Travel sect's overall strength was considered weak among the 9 great sects, the people they sent to help in the small games were limited in both quantity and quality. It was because of her outstanding deployment that she won 3 games in a row. In the end, it was because the Heaven's chosen people sent a large number of strong people into the game. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice, so she lost. However, it was also because of her outstanding performance that she won the favor of White Brows and was given such an important position. She cherished this opportunity very much. She wanted to do her part for her sect and her domain. Moreover, there were people closest to her in this game. Her mother would also participate in this game of chess. If it was a powerful force like Qing Wei, they would never let their pill cultivators step into the dangerous battlefield. The losses outweighed the gains. However, Xian Yuan didn't succeed. They didn't have enough cultivators, and some of them were disqualified in the previous small games. Therefore, every strength was precious. No matter how average their fighting strength was, they were still stronger than Yuanying. Dejia also never avoided this kind of battle. The carefree travel sect was used to being carefree, but they weren't timid. They also had their own perseverance. If someone made them feel that they weren't carefree, they would also fight with their lives. Her mother became a monarch later than her. She was very worried. This might be the only selfish reason she had as the head of the battle deployment. There was still some time before the big game started. She was now drinking and gathering almost every day. She didn't want to get drunk before the battle. Instead, she wanted to observe the characteristics of every cultivator under her command. This was what she had been persisting in doing. Only in this way could she send the most suitable people at the most suitable time. Only then could they win, and not simply treat them as pawns. There was a limit of 2,000 people in one round. There were close to 5,000 Yuanying cultivators, but not all of them were good at fighting. As a result of being too carefree, almost half of them were actually playing the Taoist best game, light wind and clouds, wild cranes, alchemy and talismans, carefree and unrestrained. Under such circumstances, in addition to the loss of a considerable part of the previous small battle, Xiaoyaoyu, together with Yuanying and the Supreme Immortal, had less than 2,000 soldiers who could fight. The rest were made up by the Qingwei Immortal Sect and the Primeval Cave. Of course, she knew her own martial brothers and sisters in her own sect. She didn't need to observe them in this way. However, she needed to know her fellow Taoists from the other two sections. The Yuanying were not particularly important, but she needed to know each of the Supreme Immortals. This was because in the battle, she would use them in the most suitable direction. They were capable of noble birth and were sent to help, so they were not easy to serve. Even in such an important world war, there were some who thought highly of themselves and admired themselves. This was human nature. When the forest was big, there were all kinds of birds. Even the Supreme Immortals were not completely exempt. For example, the gathering this time was neither fish nor fowl. The gathering was neither a gathering nor a drinking party. It was held to welcome the last batch of Master perfected lords from the two most powerful sects of Taoism. There were a total of 34 people, and most of them were very young. They had been perfected lords for less than 500 years. In a big game, there were restrictions on the cultivators who could participate. There could be no more than 9 young masters, no more than 40 primordial spirits, and no more than 200 masters. However, there could not be too many. Xiaoyaoyu was in an awkward position. There were only 5 young masters. This time, Qingwei and Yuanshi each supported one. In fact, they were not full yet, so there was nothing they could do. With the support of the Primordial Spirit Supreme and the other two sects, they were full. However, in the quota of 200 masters, the gap was relatively large. Even with these helpers, there were less than 200 people. Fortunately, the gap was not too big, so they could still fight. For Qingwei and Yuanshi, of course, it was unlikely that they would send the real elites because they still had to fight in the future. Therefore, most of the people they sent were young Supreme Immortals who had been monarchs for hundreds of years. They were high-spirited and a little arrogant. After all, not everyone had walked through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. It was impossible for ordinary cultivators to have an experience like Lu Xiaoyi. For most cultivators, being able to kill a cultivator of the same realm in 100 years was enough for them to boast for a long time. In such a group of people, some of them didn't take their master seriously. Their words and actions were somewhat frivolous, as if they were the saviors of the world. I'm here to help you, so you'll have to support me. Taoist Huai Yu of the Qingwei Immortal Sect rubbed the wine cup in his hand, a little absent-minded. He was a little dissatisfied that he was sent to Xiaoyaoyu. It was not because he was afraid of death, but because he could not see any hope in Xiaoyaoyu. In a game of chess, the number of yang spirit cultivators was very important. To a large extent, it could determine the direction of a game of chess. There were only 7 of them on their side, and 2 of them were reinforcements. This tilted the balance of victory and defeat. Moreover, the number of Yin masters was not full, and the Yuan cultivators were all over the place. It was a little self-deceiving to say that there was still a chance of winning in such a comparison of strength. His point of view was that since the sect had extra strength, it would be better to distribute the precious strength among the 300 or so Xiaoyaoyu, just like Xiaoyaoyu, and strive to win a few more games. Only in this way could they achieve the goal of using the strength to the greatest extent, instead of struggling in a big game of chess with little chance of winning. Or they might as well send out all the elites of Qingwei and Yuanshe to help Xiaoyaoyu win a game and send the great cultivators of Heaven's Choice home. A game of chess was a battle. The most taboo thing was to gather people together. Either give up or try to win with all your strength. What could help with this kind of insignificant help? His idea was very popular among the cultivators of the 2 sects who came to help. They were not very satisfied with this kind of patching that did not change the foundation. In the final analysis, they were just worried about the face of Xiaoyaoyu's sect. What kind of time was it that they still cared about these superficial feelings? This was what a lot of people in this group were not very satisfied with. They blamed the sect for not being decisive, blamed Xiaoyaoyu for not being strong enough, and lamented that they might lose the qualification to fight after one battle. Because of all these, their attitude towards their masters was very impolite. In fact, their ideas were very reasonable. It was just that their reason had lost to the sect's face, which made them feel unreconciled. Chapter 14:17. I heard that in the distant 5th ring, the Buddhist forces retreated in defeat, and the one who played the main role was a true lord of carefree travel? I don't understand. Since there's such a person in carefree travel, why didn't he help his own sect? Why did he go to the distant 5th ring to show off? Why you used this as a pretext to make a fuss? Many cultivators agreed. It was difficult to spread news of what happened in the universe, but some high-profile events, such as the battle between Taoists and Buddhists, would attract many people's attention. It wasn't new for news to spread to Zhou Xian in the past 20 years. Among them, the spiritual treasure system played a very important role. Lu Xiaoyi wasn't the only person who had connections with innate spiritual treasures, and he wasn't the only person who dared to break into the domain. It was just that because there were many people who spread the news, word of mouth became a little distorted and not so accurate. Kawa didn't say anything. She couldn't show her embarrassment. As a host, she needed to maintain the stability of the people before the war. In her opinion, although these people were often dissatisfied, it was just a way to vent. Being able to come here and do their best meant something. Thus, she explained, "Senior brothers, you're right, but it's not very detailed. There are some inside stories that aren't known to many people. This person's name is Ear, and I think everyone has heard of him. He performed well when he was sent to Heaven's Choice. This person isn't from Carefree Travel, nor is he from Zhou Xian. He's a traveling Taoist who came from the distant 5th ring. So when Zhou Xian was in trouble at the same time, he returned to the 5th ring because he couldn't bear to part with his hometown and family. It's understandable. There's nothing much to say about this. The reinforcements that Ear brought were basically from the resistance forces of Heaven's Choice, and he didn't transfer any troops from Zhou Xian. So there's no need to talk about favoritism or weakening Zhou Xian. The matters of Zhou Xian should be resolved by the people of Zhou Xian. We can't rely on the help of outsiders. Don't you think so, senior brothers?" Kawa also learned of this news not long ago. It was just as she had a premonition when she first met this guy. This guy was a spy. A great battle was about to break out, so he returned to help his hometown. This was completely understandable, a matter of common sense. However, in terms of personal feelings, there was still some disappointment in his heart. It was a faint and indescribable sense of loss. Sure enough, the people of his hometown, the scenery of his hometown, the sect of his hometown, and the senior sister of his hometown were more important. Comparison was the scariest thing in everything. With this comparison, the difference would be obvious. However, she had no choice but to speak up for him. Carefree travel is also one of the 9 upper sects of Joseon. Since this person is a guest, and we've been together for hundreds of years, it's 2. If this person can be used by Joseon, with the support of these 2,000 elites and the hundreds of ancient ferocious beasts, the situation will be different. At the very least, we'll be able to win 1 or 2 more rounds. The difference between the 2 is huge. Some cultivators were unwilling to give up. In fact, they were just venting their emotions. It was a bit unreasonable. Jiahua was calm and didn't want to argue anymore. However, the other Taoist Xiaoyao beside her, who was also helping her control the nascent soul, couldn't bear to listen anymore. This person was more serious, so he opened his mouth to refute. Martial uncles, please know that it's precisely because these reinforcements are from Heaven's choice that they can't come to Joseon to help. They've completely lost their way to return to Heaven's choice. We cultivators should strive to improve ourselves. It's not the right way to place our hopes on others. Another lord of the origin sneered. Improve ourselves? If we really want to improve ourselves, why are we here? These words were a bit too much. If they didn't respond well, it might cause a gap between these helpers and the people of carefree travel. This was a big taboo in battle. If the helpers were dissatisfied and the helpers were dissatisfied, how could they cooperate? Even Kawa, who was used to being calm and composed, didn't know how to answer. She couldn't ruin the atmosphere at the scene, but she couldn't weaken the momentum of her sect. Huayu coughed softly. He didn't want to see such a situation. For lords of the origin like them, they had to be clear about what was right and what was wrong. They could have small dissatisfaction and small disputes, but they couldn't destroy the trust between the 2 sides. As a whole, if Joseon had internal conflicts, there was no need to fight this defensive battle. Since he was the one who started it, of course, he had to finish it. He had to make everyone feel better. The best way to solve the problem was to change the topic. Using another attractive topic to cover up the embarrassing topic was the best way to solve it. So he laughed loudly. I don't know why you are here, but I have my own purpose here. I've long heard that carefree travel fairy Kawa is like a flying fairy, gentle and dafa. Today I see you. You are even better than the rumors. Huayu is not talented, but I'm willing to fight for you in the chessboard battle. I hope to be rewarded by you with a drink. This was the method of using personal problems to dilute the sex problems. The frontline soldiers were not ordinary chess pieces. They had to fight to the death, and they had to go wherever there was danger. If they were not the core of the sect, the carefree travel elites who were bound by sect rules couldn't be competent. For these helpers, there must be a reason why they were willing to be the frontline soldiers. For example, a drink. If they were still alive after returning from the battle, Ka would personally serve them wine in front of everyone. It also represented another meaning, which was to ask for a Taoist companion. Of course, cultivators couldn't speak in a straightforward manner. They had to be tactful and roundabout. Otherwise, how different would they be from ordinary people? Of course, Huayu didn't lack women. However, if it was a beautiful immortal monarch, that would be a rare resource that could only be found by chance. He had this intention, but it wasn't necessary. He took this opportunity to bring it up. Firstly, it would resolve the awkwardness. Secondly, it would fulfill his original intention. As soon as he opened his mouth, the other cultivators who were assisting him all cheered and supported him. They were all great cultivators and knew the severity of the situation. Since they couldn't make things difficult for their master's sect, it was also good to tease this fairy. Ka Wadafa said, "This is related to the safety of Joseon. Senior brothers, you are all helping out for the sake of righteousness." Kawa regarded everyone as the frontline soldiers, so it's not good to favor one and discriminate against the other. However, in terms of seniority, of course, the people of the Carefree Travel School are at the front. If the master doesn't dare to fight, how can he ask the guest to fight? Kawa's response was also tactful. Over the years, she had rich experience in dealing with similar situations. There was only one principle, which was to not take advantage of this situation. She had to eliminate some unrealistic thoughts at the first moment. Otherwise, how could Yuning still be the only one who persisted until now? If her mind wasn't firm, she would have been pestered countless times by some evil person in the past hundreds of years. She would have lost her mind long ago. This was the difficulty of women's cultivation. It was much more troublesome than men's. Chapter 14:18. Kawa's resolute reply made some people very dissatisfied. You, Xiao Yu, are already so troubled by your own situation, yet you are so stubborn. Everyone in your sect doesn't want to suffer losses. You are an anomaly. Why you had been humiliated? This was originally a trivial matter, but now it had instead aroused his arrogance. If this woman knew when to advance and retreat, it would just be a drink, and it would just be a beautiful story afterwards. What would he really do? The other party is also a monarch, and she is not a girl from small sect. But he won't get angry, because it will lose his identity as a cultivator of a big sect. He just said lightly, "Oh, then we will have to see the style of Xiaoyao vanguard soldiers. Maybe you don't need us?" Kawa was silent, and she was a little tired. In the world of cultivators, if you don't have absolute strength to suppress, a situation like this is unavoidable. It happened before, but it was not as obvious as this time, and the opponent's background was not so strong. War involves many factors, and it will never be completely tied together. Zhou Xian's performance is already very good under the pressure of external enemies. Looking at the cultivators of Heaven's Choice outside, they are even worse than them. There are all kinds of scheming and fighting, and all kinds of working but not putting in effort. It is only because of their huge size that they did not cause too much trouble. But the people of Zhou Xian can already feel the deep gap between them, especially the irreconcilable contradiction between Heaven's Choice and Buddhism. The key is whether they can persist until the day such a contradiction erupts. A message talisman came from the Great Freedom Hall. Kawa apologized to everyone and summoned white eyebrows. She has something to discuss, so she can only leave a few assistants to entertain everyone. As soon as she left, the group of monarchs below became even more critical. How can it be so coincidental that she will find an excuse to leave when she is mentioned? The few free and unfettered nascent soul cultivators who stayed behind were in a bit of a predicament. They were not perfected sovereigns, so they felt a bit of pressure in front of these unruly seniors. However, they could not leave and could only put on a fawning smile and endure. The true monarchs became more and more unbridled, laughing and joking without restraint. There was even a true monarch who got together with the serious Yuanying that had spoken before. "Martial nephew, let me ask you, is there any cultivator in your Carefree Mountain sect who is close to Fairy Jia? Let us see what kind of people they are. How could they let such a peerless beauty waste her youth and cultivate alone? Don't you know that we cultivators value the balance of yin and yang the most?" Yuanying blushed. These guys were becoming more and more impudent, but he could only endure it. Firstly, his cultivation level was not high enough, and secondly, he was not the main character. Seniors, perfected cultivator Xiao Jia has always been like this. She has never been involved in those trivial matters. She only cares about the Tao and has no other thoughts. Everyone in Carefree Mountain knows this. Some true monarchs didn't believe it. "Your Fairy Jia is like this. We believe her. But you've been free and unfettered for countless handsome men. I don't believe that you haven't had any thoughts about them. Tell us, and let us see what kind of outstanding person can catch the eye of your Fairy Jia." Yuanying was forced into a corner. His heart was filled with resentment, and he didn't care about anything else. Of course, he had heard some rumors. Since these so-called seniors didn't know what was good for them, he would use it to shut their mouths. Let's see who else dares to boast here. There is one person who has been pestering perfected cultivator Xiao Jia for hundreds of years. No matter how perfected cultivator Xiao Jia refused, he was shameless and pestered her endlessly. Why you laughed? Oh, your Carefree Mountain sect has always been about elegance and elegance. There's such a bad guy here. Even if Fairy Jia doesn't care, the other people in Carefree Mountain sect didn't care. Yuanying was actually secretly up to no good. He wanted to slap these seniors in the face. They didn't care. That person has always been dissolute. I heard that he even had an affair with Fairy Xia of the Huangting Taoism. He's a person who eats in his mouth and looks at the pot. It's a pity that this person's temper is explosive. Moreover, he's sinister and ruthless. Although Carefree Mountain is big, no one dares to care about him. Everyone listened with interest. Fairy Xia of the Huangting Taoism was a famous figure in the entire Zhou upper realm. Many people grew up listening to this woman's name. It had been like this since Jindan. There were also countless wild and fanciful fantasies. Unfortunately, most of them didn't have the chance to meet her. There was such a person in Carefree Mountain sect? That's impossible, right? Moreover, they didn't hear that Fairy Xia had any Taoist companions or close friends. Someone didn't believe it. Little guy, it's not a good habit to boast in front of your seniors. If you can't tell us the truth today, we won't let you off. Another person mocked. Don't think that you can fool us with a random person. We're all at your Yao Mountain right now, so we'll be able to see him immediately. To be able to do this and still be safe and sound, we really want to see what kind of amazing person he is. Yuan Ying was mischievous and even led people into a trap. That's not all. I heard that once. He even sneaked into perfected Lord Xiao Jia's cave to peek at her bathing. In the end, it was left unsettled and no one dared to mention it again. A perfected lord was furious. Who is this person? He's really a disgrace to us cultivators. How is he different from those wastrels in the marketplace? If your Carefree Mountain sect can't deal with such a person, we'll help you deal with him. I don't believe that in Zhou he can do whatever he wants. Yuan Ying began to reveal his true intentions. It was finally time for him to vent his anger. It's not easy to deal with him. That person has a lot of brothers under him. They're all fierce and fiendish. They kill people without blinking and eat people without spitting out their bones. Seeing that the perfected lords were staring at him with murderous gazes, he was afraid that he would be in trouble if he kept them in suspense. Thus, he said softly, he has a group of friends. There are physique vein cultivators, martial sage Dao field, blood river sect, and soul cultivators. There are thousands of them. There are also ancient beasts from the entire Heaven's Choice as accomplices. He also has a sword soldier army. The most terrible thing is that the orthodoxy behind him is the most fierce Xianyuan sword sect in the universe. He doesn't seem to be here. I heard that he led his army back to the Fifth Ring. He buried 8,000 monks in the Blue Sky sect. Then he destroyed the allied army of Zerg and the winged men in the Fifth Ring. Finally, he gathered the forces of the Fifth Ring and destroyed the Zerg winged men, forcing the Buddhist army to retreat without success. It's him. He kept pestering perfected Lord Xiao Jia, coaxing and pestering, all kinds of molestation. No one in the entire Carefree Mountain sect dared to stand up and say a word of justice. However, perfected Lord Xiao Jia did not agree to his rude request at all. Then I'd like to ask seniors, do you feel that you're more fierce than that person? Or do you feel that you're stronger? Perfected Lord Xiao Jia didn't even put this kind of person in her eyes, let alone, of course, if there's a chance in the future, if you're willing to teach him a lesson, I, Carefree Mountain sect, have no objections. I'll even arrange for a healing pill master to accompany you. Oh, right, he's called Single Ear. That's his name in Zhou. His real name should be Lu Xiaoi. As for his background, if seniors feel that he's not careful, you can also talk to his sect. Yuan Ying was delighted, because the seniors were all dumbfounded. Chapter 1419. Little Yuan Ying was very satisfied. This person is vengeful and short-tempered. If anyone offends him or the people around him, he will definitely take revenge. Haha, of course, Immortal Xiao Jia is not a short-tempered person. As long as everyone works together, he will treat everyone as friends. The universe was boundless and the distance was infinite. News did not flow freely. After many mouths, Lu Xiaoi was demonized without exception. Some of them were intentional, while others were just trying to boost morale. In any case, Lu Xiaoi had now been described as a monster with 3 heads and 6 arms. His ordinary side had been deliberately ignored, leaving only the exaggerated fierceness. He was still very good at fooling people. At the very least, no one talked about immortal Xiao Jia anymore. This was because people like her were usually very jealous. It was not worth it to offend the big snake under the bush for a flower that could only be seen but not eaten. Moreover, this was originally a trivial matter that was casually brought up. No one had deliberately come here to propose marriage. Everyone had a goal, and a pursuit. For the future of Zhou Xian. The little nascent soul suddenly realized that his goal was not very successful because these elders had quickly connected him to the big demon. The Qingwei immortal sect had done it through the slug, and the primeval cave sect had done it through the harelip. The enemy of an enemy may be a friend, but the friend of a friend must also be a friend. Was there a problem? Everyone was actually a family. The role change was so natural that little Yuanying could not help but admire the ability of these elders to swallow their saliva. This was really a great cultivation. This quick-wittedness and naturalness made people want to prostrate themselves in admiration. But no matter what, the matter that immortal Xiao Jia did not solve was solved by little Yuanying. This kind of solution was somewhat brainless. Immortal Xiao Jia would not be angry, right? Kawa did not have time to be angry. Although she knew what happened at the gathering immediately, although she was a little angry at her subordinate, Yuanying, for speaking rudely and putting himself in a very awkward position. After thinking about it, since it was inevitable to come into contact with these inexplicable things in the cultivation world, it was better to just get involved with a fierce person. At least, no one would come to find trouble with him. Lu Xiaoyi? This guy seemed to have mentioned it to her before. It was half a joke, and she did not take it seriously. But now that she knew, she could not help but feel sad, knowing that it was an eternal farewell. Life was painful. She didn't have the time to be sentimental, because the Carefree Travel Competition's roster had been completely confirmed. There were still a few days from now, and she had to use this short period of time to understand each and every one of them. In order to help her, Bai Mei had also deliberately explained the actual situation of each and every one of the true monarchs in the Carefree Travel Competition. These things were actually very important to a sect, and they were the biggest secrets of the sect's safety. Kawa and her mother were both cultivating in the Carefree Mountain. The elders of the family had never left the Carefree Mountain. They were trustworthy. This was the vision of a responsible major cultivator. You don't have to worry about the battle between the sun spirits. Although Xiaoyao Yu only has 7 yang gods participating in the battle, it's not a problem for me to fight against 3 of them alone. If there are unforeseen consequences because of the sun spirits, I will bear the responsibility. You just need to coordinate the cultivators below, especially the use of the Supreme. Why? I heard that some of the foreign Supreme are not very convinced. Do you need my help? Kawa shook her head. No need. Kawa can solve it. In fact, it seems to have been solved. White Brow sighed, which was rare. For someone who had always been tough, there was rarely a time when he regretted. I painstakingly raised a hungry tiger. It wasn't easy for its teeth to be sharp enough to be released to bite people. In the end, I accidentally let the tiger return to the mountain. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable and unpredictable. Kawa was very curious. Senior brother, I heard that the 5th ring road is extremely long. It can't be reached in hundreds of years. There's also the pain of getting lost. In that case, how do you go back? If there really is some kind of shortcut, since he can go back, he can naturally come back. White Brow snorted. No matter how I thought about it, he didn't have a feasible way to leave, so I was a little lax on him. Who would have thought that he actually had the ability to use an innate spirit treasure? He used the Heavenly Eyes spirit treasure to achieve his goal. This brat, he's a good actor. With such an escape route, he still pretended to go around and listen for the secrets of the punctuation marks. I was also fooled by him. This should be just a coincidence. It should be when he went to the Taipu realm in Jindan. This brat has been holding back all this time. How scheming. Kawa, you don't know, but Taipu Jun won't come back this time. This is a normal defense of the Heavenly Eyes spirit treasure system. Another innate spirit treasure is about to come. Even if this brat is making a scene and pretending to be obedient, it's impossible for him to use another spirit treasure so quickly, right? He can't come back. Even if he knows the location, He won't be able to fly back without 300 years. What can he do? Kawa was a little disappointed, but she didn't show it. Reason told her that even if there was an extra sun spirit, it might not be able to change the outcome of this chess game. This was not something that individual energy could change at all, but she was still very curious. She wanted to know if this guy had been lying to her all this time. Senior brother. He said that ever since the first day he came to Zhou, you already knew of his origins and have always tolerated him. That's why he said he wasn't a spy. If you must say it, are you also an accomplice? Whitebrow laughed. Of course. I'm a dignified sun spirit. How can I not know that 2 Jean Dan ants sneaked in under my nose? But I'm not their accomplice. I'm just a caretaker. It's just a pity that the caretaker failed. They took my bait, borrowed my power, and basked in my glory, but in the end, played a victorious escape. Kawa finally breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. It seemed that this guy hadn't done anything bad in Zhou this time. The only thing about personal morality was that she had to bear it herself. Anyway, her reputation wasn't good now. It had long been ruined by that guy. Whitebrow said seriously, in this big game, there are many forces on the sidelines who want to see us make a fool of ourselves. Only self-improvement is the best way to shut people's mouths. We've performed well in the previous 3 small games. As long as we can win a big game, we won't lose out overall. So my request is that you don't hold back. Don't hold back your strength for the sake of safety. We won't have it next time. This is your only chance. For the other cultivators of Xiaoyao, the sect has already given strict orders. There is no retreat. The cowards will be kicked out of the sect. You don't have to worry. At critical moments, you should try your best to use your own people in key positions. At least we'll fight hard enough. Here's the list. Take it back and plan carefully. Chapter 1420. On the list, there were 7 yang spirits, 40 primordial spirits, and 187 spirits. In addition to the many yuanying, there were actually less than 2,000 people, and there was still a gap. However, it didn't matter. In a big game of chess with thousands of people, these dozens of people didn't make much of a difference. There was really no way to send them. Those who couldn't fight came to make up the numbers, and it would be easy to strengthen the other party's confidence. This was the first time Kawa was in charge of such a large-scale scene. It didn't mean that no one in the carefree travel could host it except her, but everyone else had the obligation to go in and fight, so the burden fell on her. She had observed this process 4 times, but watching others dispatch and doing it herself were 2 different things. The responsibility was heavy, and she was a little nervous. The big game was different from the other games of the Heaven and Earth chessboard. Relatively speaking, the rules and restrictions of the Heaven and Earth chessboard were reduced to the lowest, but the self-initiative of the cultivators was maximized. It was a half-closed, half-restrained, and half-autonomous game. The game was divided into 4 realms, which were not connected to each other. They were called the God, Immortal, Devil, and Human realms. The God realm was a place for yang spirits to compete. The Immortal realm was a place for primordial spirits to fight. The Devil realm was a place for Yin spirits to fight, and the Human realm was a battlefield for yuanying to fight. In each realm, people were allowed to withdraw. This was a very humane part of the Heaven and Earth chessboard, which left enough room for the participating cultivators. It was a competition of the will of the 2 sides to fight. It was not enough to just have ability and strength, but also the determination to fight to the end. In this regard, because the people of Zhou were protectors, they were more tenacious. If one side won in a certain realm, then they would naturally be qualified to go up to the next realm. For example, in the human realm of yuanying, if the yuanying of Zhou won the final victory, then they could enter the Devil realm to help their own Yin spirits. If they won again, everyone would go to the Immortal realm together to fight against the primordial spirits of Heaven's choice, and they would all reach the God realm together. This way, they could maximize the ability of cultivators with cultivation lower than the Yang spirit realm, so that the cultivators of all realms would not be mixed together, and the battle would be full of uncertainty. For the people of Zhou, Their number of yang spirit cultivators was not as good as that of the Tianzi continent, so they used this method to weaken the influence of the Tianzi continent as much as possible. Every realm had its own rules. For example, army chess had the most people in the mortal realm. Chess had the most people in the Yin Soul realm. Chess had the most people in the Yin Soul realm. Checkers had the least people in the primordial soul realm. There were no rules in the immortal realm. You might as well just kill him and lie down. Ka wouldn't need to worry about the deity realm. With her current cultivation level, she wouldn't be able to handle it, as there were fewer immortal realm, immortal soul cultivators. The immortal soul perfected lords in the chessboard could more or less react according to their own circumstances. They only needed Ka to give them suggestions from an overall perspective. Because there were too many nascent soul cultivators, each side had close to 2,000 people. Truth be told, it was a chaotic battle. Thus, they could only control the overall situation on a large scale. It was very difficult for them to control the situation to a single person. Most of the time, the assistant was in charge. Only in the devil realm was the battlefield of the Yin Soul perfected lords. There were many people, so they couldn't effectively form an autonomous command, but there weren't so many that it was chaotic. Therefore, this was Ka's main battlefield. And most importantly, no matter how many Yuanian cultivators there were, it was difficult for them to pose a threat to the Yang spirit. For example, in the big and small intestine blind path, several great Buddhas fell under the spells of many perfected lords because they couldn't move. In fact, it had nothing to do with the Yuanian. The 3 levels of perfected lords could already threaten each other. Thousands of Yuanian cultivators and hundreds of Yin souls were fundamentally different. Therefore, based on her previous observation experience, Ka decisively focused all her attention on the devil realm where the Yin souls were. This group was the biggest variable in the chessboard. Many of the Yin soul perfected lords had the strength close to the primordial soul stage. They were a group full of imagination. But it just so happened that they were in the devil realm where the Yin souls were. 13 of them were missing. This required Ka to use her ability to command and use the sharpest spear to attack the opponent's weakest shield. Accumulating small victories was a great victory. Securing victory in the devil realm could be said to be half the battle won. 187 Yin soul perfected lords, among which 33 were from Qingwei and Yuanshu. Their strength might be very strong, but she wasn't sure to what extent they would obey her and whether they would be willing to die for her in this battle. It was very difficult, but this wasn't a reason for her to give up. Therefore, she decided to gather these supporters again and try to win their trust. But the effect of this gathering was obviously a little off. Before she could open her mouth, countless questions were thrown at her from the opposite side. Fairy Jia, may I ask how it feels to be entangled for 600 years? Fairy, are you deliberately baiting us? Playing hard to get? Grapes that you can't eat are the sweetest? Fairy Jia, may I ask what you think of Fairy Xia of the Huangting Taoism? We are all reputable people, and we won't easily spread it to others. Fairy Jia, may I ask what happened on the last night in the cave residence? It's reasonable to say that with the level of a supreme, it's impossible for someone to touch the window without reacting. Is this a trap? Give a sweet date first? In the end, Kawa still couldn't figure out the mentality of these people. Was it to respect the strong and admit defeat? Or was it to be the opposite? When the time came, they would work but not do their best to laugh at the carefree travel team. Qin Xiu was also a very strange creature. Time passed in the blink of an eye, especially when you wanted to think more about something. Today was the day of the Carefree Travel Team's grand chess game. Not only the cultivators of the Carefree Travel Team, but also the disciples of the small sects under the Carefree Travel Team. They were the most relaxed group because they had already completed their mission with outstanding results. In a sense, they didn't let Zhou Xian down. There were also people from other sects, whether it was the eliminated innumerable creation sect, the Huangting Taoism sect, the human sect, or the Taishan Middle Yellow sect, the Qingwei Immortal sect, and the Yuanshu True Cave. Everyone gathered here as if they could connect with the participating cultivators, giving them strength and making them feel that they were with the whole of Joseon. This was also a psychological tactic implemented by the higher-ups of Joseon, which could effectively increase the confidence and courage of the participating cultivators. In a battle between cultivators, it was very important whether they dared to fight to the death. Except for people like Lu Xiaoyi, who rolled in life and death situations every day, most cultivators still lacked such experience. If you were timid, you might lose the opportunity that originally belonged to you. Because of the fear of losing thousands of years of cultivation, you wouldn't be able to exert your strength beyond your level. In most cases, the difference between cultivators was the same, and the difference was in mentality. It depended on whether you were willing to go all out. Chapter 14:21. P.S. Tonight's update will be moved to 8 o'clock. Sloth, work harder and try to write one more chapter. At the same time, ask for votes. The battle of monthly votes is too fierce. I thought that it would be no problem to fight for the top 10, but now it seems that I was dreaming. Friend with tickets, don't forget, on the last day, let's see the power of the sword soldiers. Thank you for your support. The cultivators participating in the battle were bathed in auspicious clouds. The cloud was a chess cloud. When the time came, it would naturally accept all the cultivators in the chess game. There was the aura of a sect, and it couldn't be faked. In a battle like this, the heaven and earth chessboard had its own rules. For the defending side of Joseon, the cultivators' qualifications would be strictly controlled. This was also Lu Xiaoyi's original consideration. Even if he brought his own army back, it would be difficult for him to participate in such a game of chess. Because he hadn't lived in Joseon before, he was not qualified. As for how long he had to live in Joseon before he could be considered a real person of Joseon, this boundary was naturally considered by the heaven and earth chessboard. It was unknown to the cultivators. This was the power of a real, innate, spiritual treasure. It would never deliberately side with one side in the chess game and enhance the owner's abilities. This was not the way of spiritual treasures, but the cornerstone of the spiritual treasure race's survival for millions of years. It was also because of this that no human would think of how to destroy them. Because as long as you occupied Joseon with your own ability, the heaven and earth chessboard would still be at your disposal. When a large number of attackers came, blocking the invaders and delaying them into the chess game was the greatest help in itself. Otherwise, with the size of the cultivators of Heaven's Choice, Joseon would have fallen long ago. The rules were the cornerstone of the existence of innate spiritual treasures. When both sides entered the chessboard space, it was the fairest battle. It was so fair that the rules couldn't be used. This was already the greatest help for the people of Joseon. What else could they ask for? Ask the heaven and earth chessboard to devour the people of Heaven's Choice? How could it be possible? White Eyebrows and the other 7 young gods bowed to the sea of people below. For the sake of Joseon, we cultivators should work together and live up to your expectations. The sound of landslides and tsunamis could be heard, making people's blood boil. But those young spirit masters were not the same. They stood higher and saw farther. In fact, there had always been controversy among the top young gods in Joseon about Xiao Yu's big game. In the heaven and earth chessboard rules that they had chosen, there had always been 2 schools of thought. One group gathered all the most elite forces in Joseon to defend 2 or 3 big games and give up on the rest. There was an advantage to this method, and that was that they could win several or even dozens of matches in a row, eliminating a large number of outstanding cultivators from Heaven's Choice. But the disadvantages were equally obvious. Once Heaven's Chosen One reacted and gathered the elites of more than 30 countries to fight back, as long as they were defeated, it would be equivalent to Joseon's most elite forces being wiped out. The process was that Joseon's resistance would become weaker and weaker until all the elites were killed, and there was no way for them to make a comeback. The other group was doing what they were doing now. They used the 9 upper sects as the main force to deal with them evenly. The advantage of this method was that the resistance was balanced. The powerful upper sects were always left behind, such as Qingwei, Yuanshi, and bitter meditation. But there were also many disadvantages. Just like Wanyan's good fortune, the big game was easily defeated, and the elites were no longer useful. In the first 4 games, Zhou Xian had always used the second method. 9 games to determine the winner and loser. Now, more than half of the process had been completed, so the 5th game of Xiaoyao Yu was very crucial. Would it change, or would it not change? What cultivators valued most was how to grasp the fleeting opportunity of change in the trend. Their intuition was in the 5th game of Waste Eye. But such a big change, a completely subversive arrangement of troops, required great courage to implement. For most Zhou Xian people, who were used to living a peaceful life, this was really too difficult for them. Therefore, the radical faction, led by White Eyebrows, insisted on starting the 5th game with all their might. They concentrated their strength to defeat Heaven's Choice, but the conservative faction still insisted on fighting the previous way. The less trouble, the better. They passively followed the changes. If the overall situation did not change, they would not change either. The 2 sides fought several times, but they could not figure out the reason. White Eyebrow's strength was tyrannical, and he was outstanding among the young gods in Zhou Xian. But the sect behind him, Xiaoyao Yu, was weak and could not speak harshly. In the end, it formed such a strange situation. It was not that the other Taoists did not send any reinforcements. However, only 2 young gods had come, and they had been attracted by Mei's personal charm. There were only 30 or so Yin gods left, and most of them were young. Those with profound cultivation and experience had been left behind in the sect. The reinforcements were sent, but they were not in place. This was the actual situation of Xiaoyao Yu's battle. This was a clash of ideas between aggressiveness and stability, a divergence in the direction of sharp change and defense. The 2 sides were in a stalemate and could not reach a consensus, resulting in the current awkward situation. This was also the reason why so many Supremes were not satisfied at the gathering organized by Kawa. It was not that they were afraid to fight, but that there was a huge difference in strategy. Many people were not optimistic about White Eyebrow's party's determination to change. They thought that it was more because Xiaoyao Yu wanted to make a name for himself by borrowing the strength of the other sects. Among the remaining 4 sects, except for Taishuan's Yellow Emperor who supported White Eyebrows, the other 3 were ambiguous. Taishuan's Yellow Emperor was also a weakling, and his right to speak was about the same as Xiaoyao Yu. This was the reason why White Eyebrow's tone was full of sorrow. He wanted to kill the enemy, but he was powerless to reverse the situation. This was the portrayal of his current mood. At this point, other than doing his best in this battle, there was no other good way. Then he looked at the Supremes group, Yuanian group. In this chess battle, no one can be ignored. Everyone is important because your personal success or failure will affect the success or failure of the group. Yuanian can help Yin gods if they work hard. Yin gods can support primordial spirits if they work hard. Primordial spirits together can decide the direction of the battle. Every single one of them was indispensable. I hope that in this battle, you can show the strength of the people of Zhou Xian. Anyway, White Eyebrows, will not withdraw because of injury. What about you? Everyone shouted in unison, and the sound waves shook the sky. However, in White Eyebrows' ears, it was just a kind of noise. Who knew which of them were really fighting to the death? Which of them were just fishing in troubled waters? The human heart was the most unpredictable. The upper realm of Zhou Xian also had requirements for this kind of battle. Those who were seriously injured and could not fight were allowed to withdraw from the chessboard. Just this rule alone was enough to make many cowards take advantage of it. Which cultivator didn't have a few tricks up their sleeves? Which cultivator didn't have the ability to properly withdraw without harming their foundation? Sighing, he knew that the time had come. He looked at a quiet room in the great Freedom Hall below him. That was where the few chief officials were. Please. White Eyebrows was the first to crash into the chessboard, and the other 6 young gods followed. Then, it was the group of Supremes, and a large number of Yuanying. Under the eyes of tens of thousands of people, no one would show fear at this time. It was too unwise. Kawa listened to her senior brother's instructions. She felt the burden on her shoulders like a mountain, so heavy that she could not breathe. When it rains, it pours. As soon as the carefree cultivators entered the chessboard of heaven and earth, an unexpected situation happened. 187 Supremes of Een gods entered. This was planned long ago. She even knew their names, appearances, strengths, and general temperament. However, as soon as they entered the chessboard of heaven and earth, the feedback from the chessboard was that there were 189. What the hell? Where did the extra 2 come from? Were they spies of heaven's choice? Chapter 1422. Kawa immediately gave an order to one of her assistants. Go and investigate. Find out who the 2 Een deities were during the chaos just now. This was definitely not an unnecessary move. In the second battle of Huangting Taoism, there was a change in the number of Een masters participating in the battle. The actual number was different from the planned number, and there were 3 more Een master perfected cultivators. At that time, the head of the Yellow Court did not pay much attention to it, thinking that it was a few enthusiastic perfected cultivators from some sects who stepped forward out of passion. In the end, these 3 people caused trouble everywhere in the demon realm. They did not fight when it was time to fight, and when it was time to fight, they even attacked their own companions in the end. There was no doubt that they were spies. This kind of situation was very likely to happen. Heaven's Chosen had long set up a chess piece in Zhou. After hundreds of years of changes, the Heaven and Earth chessboard recognized them as people from Zhou, and this kind of situation would occur. The Heaven and Earth chessboard was very powerful, but no matter how powerful it was, it could not see through people's hearts. Heaven's Chosen took advantage of the loophole, and the result was a pity that they lost. Originally, the Huangting Taoism had a good chance of winning that round. Their strategy was the opposite of that of the Carefree Travel team. They gave up the previous 330 small rounds and focused on the overall situation. In the end, they only won 1 round before the 3 spies spoiled their plan. The entire Yellow Court's record was very bad, and they were only slightly better than Wan Yan's creation team. With this kind of lesson, the sects were very careful in the later rounds, afraid that someone would impersonate them and take all kinds of precautions. However, the following rounds of the Human Sect and the Thousand Buddha Imperial Sect were all orderly, and similar incidents did not happen again. In the end, when it came to the Carefree Travel team, because the Een Master Perfected cultivators were not full, they were taken advantage of again. There was still some time between entering the game and the beginning of the battle, so Kawa had enough time to determine the origin of these 2 people, even if she had already determined that these 2 people were spies. Spies. She hated this kind of people the most, just like that annoying guy. He made people suspicious and restless all day long. It was not difficult to find out the origin of these 2 people. Because the starting point was above Shaya Mountain, there were no auspicious clouds anywhere else, so they could not enter. After experiencing the lesson of the Huangting Taoism, the sects had taken corresponding measures. There were many shadow stones from different directions and angles, so that they could determine who had entered the game. What's more, there were dozens of young gods from other sections. Under their surveillance, nothing could escape their eyes. But even with such a meticulous arrangement, she still received an inexplicable piece of news. All the Shadow Stone's records, the cultivators who entered Taoist plan. In addition, none of the dozens of Yang God ancestors present noticed any signs of abnormality. No one could enter the Heaven and Earth chessboard so openly in front of them. All the Yang God ancestral masters agreed that the 2 extra people were most likely from the outside world, entering the chessboard space from the side of heaven. They are still very likely to be spies. The deputy quickly reported what he had learned. His meaning was very clear. If a person chosen by heaven had entered the upper realm of Zhou hundreds of years ago, obtained the recognition of the Heaven and Earth chessboard after a long time, and then escape from Zhou before the upper realm of Zhou sealed off the domain. Then these people might enter the chessboard from outer space and be used as pawns of Zhou. Of course, the premise was that Zhou did not have enough people. This was another way to pass off as a fake. It was safer for spies, but it was also full of uncertainty, because you did not know if you could enter this game. However, there was actually another possibility. That was, the real Jinju and Zhou had been traveling outside and had hurried back to support his hometown. Coincidentally, he had arrived at this point. However, this possibility was not high. Not only did it require a coincidence of time, but he also had to have the strength to break into the airspace alone. How could it be so easy to break into the early warning system of more than 100,000 people? He was a spy. Hua made a decision. She needed to find an opportunity to kill him. However, she could not do it at the beginning. Otherwise, it would easily cause chaos in the camp battle at the beginning. It was best to find an opportunity during the battle. Stealthily. God, immortal, devil, and mortal realms. The God realm had no rules and could fight freely. The primordial spirits of the immortal realm followed the rules of Chinese checkers. There were too many Yuanying in the mortal realm, so they followed the rules of army chess. Only the Yin gods of the devil realm used the rules of Go. In the devil realm, it was also the realm where the master had the most power and influence. For the master, not only did he need to be skilled in Go, but he also needed to have a thorough understanding of the 200 chess pieces under his control. This was because, although this was Go, it still had a strong requirement for the individual cultivator, which was the individual chess piece. Just like the other types of chess games on the Heaven and Earth chessboard, the master could provide you with a chance to eat the chess piece, but whether you could eat the chess piece or not depended on the cultivator's final strength. Otherwise, even if you surrounded the opponent, there was nothing you could do if you did not have enough strength to eat the chess piece. There were also many special rules that were not the same as the real Go in the mortal world. This was also a major characteristic of Go in the cultivation world. There were no chess pieces that would not move if they were not placed on the board. They were very particular about the autonomy of the chess pieces, and not all of them could only wait passively. The connection between Jiahua and the cultivator chess pieces on her side couldn't be achieved through direct verbal communication, discussion of tactics, bargaining, coercion. They could only carry out the most simple and direct orders, such as whether or not a chess piece should be deployed, where the chess piece should be placed, and make clear requests. The chess pieces must be in line with her orders on the dafa, but they could adjust the details by themselves. For example, if she placed one of her chess pieces in the star position on the chessboard, then in reality, the chess piece could choose 4 other positions besides occupying the star position. In terms of Go, it could also choose 2 small positions and 2 high positions. This was part of the freedom that the Heaven and Earth chessboard granted to each cultivator chess piece. Therefore, the victory or defeat of a game of Go not only tested the ability of the master, but also the cooperation between the master and the chess pieces. If all the chess pieces were in line with the master's orders, then the master could fully exert his or her playing ability and perfectly achieve his or her strategic and tactical position. This was the main key. On this basis, occasionally some chess pieces could freely play according to the specific situation, and it would be a good game of Go. Under the strict orders of the sect, Kawa believed that the 154 free and unfettered Yin spirit chess pieces would completely obey her orders. They would not disobey in public, but do their best to help the master to complete the layout of the battle. However, the 33 cultivators from the Qingwei immortal sect and the primeval cave might not be the same. Maybe they could be obedient in the layout stage, but once they enter the middle game, they would probably do something evil. As for the 2 spies, it was impossible to use them in the layout stage. Otherwise, if you asked them to divine the star position, they would occupy the high and small positions, and the layout would be a complete failure. Chapter 1423. P.S. I'm not satisfied with the writing of the Great War of Zhou. Maybe it's because I'm in a hurry. But no matter what, I'm sorry to everyone. I need to change my thinking in the future. Xiaoi wants to walk her own path alone. Pretending to be in the universe is the right path. But on the last day, she still shamelessly asks for votes. She wants to break into the top 10 of the monthly votes list for the first time in 3 years of writing. In the future, when she faces her grandson, she can boast, "Your grandfather was also in the top 10 of the monthly votes list on Qidian." Of course, the child will say, "Everyone else is fighting for the first place. How can you fight for the 10th place?" Now that she's stuck at the 11th place, it's very awkward. In the words of Landa, she's hanging on the balcony. Please act according to your ability. If you tip 1,500 points after 8 p.m., you'll get 4 monthly votes. That's 4 times the monthly votes. You'll be able to push Sloth forward. Many friends have tipped, so there's no need to come again. But there may be many friends who don't care about this rule. Tonight, the last night, please help Sloth. Thank you, everyone. The ranking is fake, but friendship is real. No matter what, thank you for your selfless help in the past 3 years. Thank you. Kawa's principle of using the 2 spies is to try not to use them, or to use them in an unimportant position and get rid of them. Using them in the layout will affect the overall plan. For example, from relying on the position of the stars, because the chess pieces act on their own initiative, it may become a high purpose and focus on external forces. Or it may become a complicated, small-eyed demon sword. This is not tolerated by the players because it will disrupt the consistency of the overall layout. It can't be used in the middle game of the game. If you want to push, you have to lean. If you want to push, you have to lean. If you want to push, you have to push. There's no way. For the time being, she can't think too much about the 2 spies. Now, these chess pieces are still waiting in the chessboard space. They can't see each other. What she's facing now is guessing the order of the chess pieces. A group of chess pieces appears on the heaven and earth chessboard. According to the order, it's her turn to pick the opponent. She also controls her spiritual sense to wrap the chess pieces. In the chessboard space, it's impossible to rely on spiritual sense to judge. She can only rely on luck. The opponent guessed it right. The order of the chess pieces has been decided. Heaven's Choice's black pieces go first. Zhou Xian's white pieces follow. At this point, everything was ready. The 5th round of the Heaven's Choice Zhou Xian battle officially began. The black side had a well-thought-out plan. Opening with 2 consecutive stars, they were in the lead. Kawa should make a mistake and focus on the facts. For a moment, the chess pieces were placed as if they were flying. In the layout stage, the chess pieces were placed very quickly, and the prelude board was quickly finished. Not having much contact was also a characteristic of the cultivation chess game. After all, in the end, whether or not to eat or occupy the land depended on the cultivator's individual ability. No matter how good one's plan was, if one couldn't take advantage of it, it was all in vain. The Devil Realm opened, and the other 3 realms also began at the same time. In the Divine Realm, the 16 Yang spirits were fighting against each other. Bai Mei alone faced 3 Yang spirits chosen by heaven. He was fearless and at ease, showing the strong confidence of a superior Yang spirit. The other 6 battlefields also had Yang spirits confronting each other, each displaying their own abilities. This was a long process of fighting. First, they were all Dharma cultivators, and second, they had the abnormal rebirth ability of Yang spirits. For them, there was room for mistakes in the battle. First, it didn't matter if they made a mistake or 2, because it could be corrected through rebirth. Therefore, there was no need to take too many risks. In probing each other's strength, they tried to avoid being killed as much as possible. The best way was to control the chess game. The primordial spirit battlefield was very fast because the number of people was relatively small. There were only 80 primordial spirits on both sides. They jumped around in the chess space, each doing what they wanted. Here, it was difficult to have room for the master to play. It was more about the individual cultivator's decision and courage. The situation was complicated and ever-changing. It was better to let the cultivators control the shape of the battlefield than to let others control it. Therefore, only one of Kawa's deputies was paying attention to this place, providing the overall shape of the battlefield at any time, and then leaving it to the primordial spirits to make specific decisions. The bloodiest battlefield was the Yuaning's army chess battlefield, which was the one Lu Xiaoyi had participated in when he was in the Shaking Shadow Realm. They were in groups, moving back and forth. The master could control the situation in Dafa, but once the two sides came into contact, it was completely out of control. They could only move forward. Any hesitation, timidity, or retreat would cause serious consequences. Here, one of Kawa's deputies was paying specific attention. When there was a choice in the direction of Dafa, she would make the decision. However, there were not many opportunities like this. Once thousands of Yuaning fought, in addition to strength, it was more a competition of willpower. In the Divine Land, the situation of the two sides could not be judged. This was also the place where the winner and loser of every big game would be decided at the end. Now, it was just a warm-up, and there was still a long way to go before the winner was decided. In the Divine Land, the swing between victory and defeat was too big. The casualties of a few people would often determine the short-term trend. One moment, Tianze had the upper hand, and the next moment, Zhou Xian had the advantage, but they could not last long. On the whole, the difference was not big. However, because the battlefield was only at the beginning, many things were still hidden under the iceberg and could not be reflected for a while. In the Divine Land, Zhou Xian's Yuanying had begun to show signs of weakness. This often happened in the previous games. Because Tianze's Yuanying had come into contact with a Great Way tablet earlier, they had some convenience in comprehending the Tao state. When reflected in the battle, it would directly affect the direction of the army chess. No matter how many Yuanying there were, it was difficult to change the result of the battle of the Yang spirit. However, they did not need to change the battlefield of the Divine Land. For them, as long as they could threaten to change the battlefield of the Devil Land, it was enough. Marshal Uncle Jia, the number of people on both sides of the battlefield of the Divine Land has increased to 50 people. The deputy reminded. Kawa's expression did not change. Tell them to gather together and delay the other side. I don't ask them to win, but I need time. Kawa needed enough time to complete the victory of the Devil Land. Cultivators in each realm could only go up and not down. Therefore, for the time being, she did not need to worry about what would happen to the primordial spirit of the Divine Land. However, she needed to pay attention to whether the Yuanying cultivators in the Divine Land would rush up. That almost meant that the battle was bound to fail. The situation was not optimistic. Although Kawa's chess skills were not inferior to others, the Heaven and Earth chessboard was not completely a game of chess in the mortal world. There were many other factors to consider. For example, could you play the chess piece or not? Could you slay the dragon or not? Could you play the game or not? These all depended on the cultivator's strength in the end. Even in the overall situation, because of the disadvantage of the Yuanying in the Divine Land, there was also a time limit for her. Just like in a game of Go, she had started the countdown, but the other side still had a lot of time to play. This was not her fault, but she had to take it into consideration. In the way of playing chess, the impact was that she had to adopt more aggressive playing methods, while the other side could remain calm and use softness to conquer strength. Kawa focused most of her energy on the middle game. The chess pieces were intertwined with each other, and a few big dragons were intertwined together. She had no choice but to do so. If she wanted to finish off her opponent quickly, she could not play steadily and steadily. Her original style of chess was not one of strength, but of agility and elegance. She was very good at dodging and moving. There were many factors that determined the direction of the game. She could only put the factors that she could not control to the back of her mind. She could not control the individual abilities of the cultivators, and she could not decide the direction of the Yuanying battlefield. What she could do now was to use all of her wisdom and firmly control the direction of the game. Before Senior Brother Bai Mei left, he asked for her help. This sentence was too stressful. As a matter of fact, the most important factor that determined the outcome of the Heaven and Earth chessboard was always the strength of the cultivators and the overall balance of all levels. Her role in the game could only be maximized when the two parties were on par with each other. Martial Uncle. The difference in the number of people between the two sides in the Divine Land battlefield is more than 100. I estimate that within 3 days, we will be defeated in the Divine Land battlefield. Martial Uncle, you have to be mentally prepared. The deputy monitoring the Divine Land said bitterly. But there was more than one bad news. The other deputy monitoring the Divine Land battlefield also did not have good news. Martial Uncle, in the Divine Land battlefield, Heaven's Choice has 34 primordial soul cultivators left, and Zhou Xian has 28. This situation has not changed for a while. I estimate that the trend is set. I'm afraid that we will lose in the Divine Land battlefield. Chapter 1424. Except for the Yangshan battlefield, Zhou Xian was at a disadvantage in the other 3 battlefields, and this disadvantage was getting worse and worse. Kawa knew that she couldn't delay any longer. She had to take decisive measures. She had been planning for this for a long time in order to kill the opponent's dragon. Now that the early preparations were ready, she decided to take action without hesitation. She carefully considered the order of the game and found that there was no problem. For this big dragon, she had already thought about it for several days. She had already considered the countless changes that would follow. Cultivators relied on their powerful memory and deduction abilities. A monarch chess player and a mortal chess player were 2 completely different concepts. This was due to their brain development that far exceeded that of ordinary people. 1 step, 1 board, and 1 flight. She cut off the opponent's dragon. Logically speaking, if the opponent's dragon was cut off, there would be no chance of survival. In order to slay the dragon this time, she had lost a lot of points in other aspects. If she took it step by step, she would definitely lose. If she succeeded in slaying the dragon, she would win in the middle game. This was the charm of the Devil Realm's chess game. The general situation was set. The opponent jumped into her tiger's eye with a casual move. His intention was obvious. He wanted to create a robbery material and fight to take back the dragon. From the point of view, it was impossible for the dragon to be the eye. This was also the opponent's last struggle. Kawa didn't hesitate to rob. This was a worry-free robbery. She had already understood. She wasn't afraid of the opponent's dying struggle at all. Even in the mortal world, such a method would be vulgar. It was nothing more than a buffer method to buy time, and it was a waste of one's own tribulation material. She only needed to lift it, but she didn't lift it. After a few moments of battle, Kawa's chess piece that was in charge of lifting the chess piece was eaten instead. This was the mystery of the heaven and earth chessboard. Even if you calculated everything correctly, if the opponent filled your tiger's eye with powerful cultivators, but you couldn't eat them, then all the previous arrangements would be in vain. This was also the purpose of the host of Heaven's Choice. In terms of chess skills, he might not be as good as Kawa, but he had more choices than Kawa in the choice of powerful chess pieces. Obviously, this chess piece was the most powerful cultivator under the other party's command. He was here to break the rules of the game at the crucial moment. Kawa's expression did not change. She was also prepared for such a change. He had also reserved 3 of his strongest Master perfected lords. 2 of them were carefree Masters, while the other was an outstanding helper, Huayu. It was to deal with such a tough opponent. She had seen Heaven's Choice use similar tactics in the previous games, so it wasn't new. However, while the strategy wasn't new, the people were. 3 people were thrown into the battle in a row. 1 died, and 2 were seriously injured and had to withdraw from the battle. Zhou Xian's people just couldn't eat that Heaven's chosen person's tribulation child. After 3 consecutive moves, the worryless calamity had already become solid. The Dragon of Heaven's Choice was successfully retrieved. Kawa's efforts were all for naught. His heart felt empty. Kawa still didn't know what she was feeling. Failure came so suddenly, but it was also logical. If she wasn't strong enough, she couldn't rely on chess skills to make up for it. She had let down senior brother White Brows, carefree wandering sect, and of course, Zhou Xian's upper realm. Even in the eyes of the spectators outside, It wasn't her fault. Her response was right. Her plan was ingenious. Her decision was correct. The only mistake was that 4 Joseon cultivators in a row didn't manage to eat the other party's tribulation child. At the foot of Carefree Mountain, regardless of whether it was the carefree orthodoxy or the other sects, countless cultivators were watching silently. This was the 5th game. It was a watershed. Once this game was lost, Joseon's upper realm's resistance would inevitably become difficult. Every battle was crucial, and there was no room for maneuver. Therefore, some cultivators began to bring up the past again, complaining that Carefree Wandering's white brows shouldn't have insisted on his opinion. It was precisely because of his insistence that this game was forced to start when their strength was obviously not enough. If they gave up, at least there would be a large number of elites to fill in the remaining 4 games. It would undoubtedly increase their chances of winning the later games. But now, a large number of Carefree Wandering cultivators had lost the qualification to fight again because of their failure. This was the most fatal thing. The trend would change after Zhou Xian lost the 5th game. It was only a matter of time. Yuanying's human realm was even more unbearable. The primordial spirit's immortal realm was also showing signs of defeat. The Yin spirit's devil realm failed to slay the dragon. The final combination of these factors was a large number of heaven's chosen people entering the final immortal realm, and then crushing White Brows and the others who were still persisting. This was a foreseeable outcome. There were no mistakes and no accidents. It was just a matter of strength. But Kawa was still persisting. Even if she knew that she would lose, she would not give up the final pride of a player. She told herself that there was still a chance. There were still positions. If the opponent was careless, if there was a glimmer of hope, if the heavens opened their eyes, she would never concede defeat. This was what her chess teacher who taught her since she was young often lamented. It was as if she didn't know what a cool and indifferent player's mentality was. Even if a large dragon was slaughtered on the board, and the gap was more than 10 points, she would still dig out, fight, and fight one palace after another, until the last chess piece with a pale face. In fact, cultivators would never be careless when playing chess. Therefore, Kawa's personality had never succeeded since she started playing chess. She had never turned the tables. She had never been blessed by the heavens. Then, in the most important game in her life, would she be able to turn the tables? No one would believe it. Unexpected miracles came from strength. And now, what the Xiaoyao lacked was strength. She was still 21 points away. In chess, it was almost impossible to turn the tables by retracting the palaces. It was not a matter of retracting the palaces. In normal chess, admitting defeat in the middle of the game was the rule. If she continued to play, it would be a waste of everyone's time. But Kawa did not admit defeat. This was no longer just a game of chess. It was the honor of the Xiaoyao Yu and the future of Zhou Xian. Therefore, she continued to dig for positions. The problem was that when the game came to the end, there were not enough chess pieces. She was now fighting for a calamity. Even if she won, it would be no more than 3 or 4 points. It did not matter if the opponent gave up the position to her. But the host of Heaven's Choice was obviously very angry with this Zhou Xian player's persistence. She had no chess ethics, so she did not give in. She did not even give him a single point. She had to play even if he did not give it to her. This was Kawa's style. This was her stubborn temper. There were not many calamity materials left. There was still the position of the opponent's other large dragon. In fact, it was also a tiger's eye. If it was taken, then everything would be fine. But no matter what, it was still a calamity. The opponent could not ignore it. No matter what, she had to take it. Once again, she put her divine sense into the chessboard. Kawa felt that there were not many chess pieces left in the chessboard. She needed to use them carefully. For a chess piece that was sure to be taken, then it was better to use it as cannon fodder. Those 2 spies. Chapter 1425. At the beginning of the game, she already had the intention to deal with these 2 people. However, because the game was not going well, her chess pieces were stretched thin, so she did not have the time. Now, With the idea of making use of trash, she was just continuing her strange way of playing chess. Aren't you a spy? Let's see how you're going to eat yourselves. With her divine sense, she ordered one of the chess pieces to pounce on the opponent's tiger eye. She thought that the spy might feign compliance and deviate from the position, but she did not expect that the spy would obediently pounce on the opponent's tiger eye. The opponent lifted the piece. He did not lift it. Instead, he was eaten. What was going on? Did a spy need to be so dedicated to acting? She really could not understand such an operation. However, since the opponent did not eat them, as the original player, she would definitely learn something. Who should she send? There seemed to be another spy. She was still very surprised that the spy obediently came to the position she designated. This was a very deadly move. If he did not eat these two pieces, the opponent's incomparably safe dragon would have no eyes. He would be sentenced to death by the heaven and earth chessboard. This script was really incomprehensible. The Heaven's Choice player began to surround and attack. His main target was the position of the two spies. Kawa took the opportunity to plunder the officials, because even now, the opponent could still survive after eliminating these two spies. However, he could not eat them. He could not lift them. In 3 consecutive moves, the Heaven's Choicing God was defeated by these two spies. Kawa immediately realized something. Her heart began to thump uncontrollably. After playing chess for thousands of years, her luck finally changed. The heavens had opened their eyes. In the most important game of chess in her life, her perseverance had paid off. She finally understood that these two people were not spies. Even spies were not like this. They must be the powerful, perfected Lord Zhou Xian who had returned from afar. They dared to break through the encirclement in outer space just to rescue their home planet. By chance, they bumped into her game of chess. I'm so stupid. When the Heaven's Choice player bumped into her, if she had sent one of these two cultivators, would the result have been different? Searching for officials could not solve the fundamental problem. If he wanted to win, he had to kill this dragon. Kawa changed her mind. She picked up a piece and played it again. At this point, if the Heaven's Chosen One couldn't finish the 3 pieces, he would be in danger of being slaughtered. Of course, the current raisins were no longer single raisins. Instead, they had changed from single raisins to double raisins. Now, it was a 3-man team battle. In the future, it would become a large-scale team battle. After eating through this dragon, he had more than 30 eyes inside and out. That would be the real deal. These two spies, oh, they're not spies, they're wanderers returning home. They could display their strength in individual battles, but could they still stand firm in the dragon-slaying group battle? This was the final gamble. At this point, there was nothing she didn't dare to do. Have you ever heard of a gambler who doesn't dare to place a bet when he's left with his last ingot of silver? At the foot of Carefree Mountain, everyone was dumbfounded. The situation had changed once again. In the most important battlefield of true monarchs, great waves had appeared out of nowhere. If 100 or 200 true monarchs of true monarchs were free to attack, then the one who took the lead would be the final victor. The primordial spirits were also very important, but their numbers were too few. The Yuanying had many people, but their levels were not enough. The battle of Yuanying in the human realm was nearing its end. Although the cultivators of Zhou Xian fought with their lives, they were still retreating. In the end, there would be 400 to 500 Yuanying who would charge into the demon realm. In the immortal realm battlefield, there were only 15 Heaven's Chosen cultivators left, and only 6 Zhou Xian cultivators were left. It was also nearing its end, and now there was still one last dragon-slaying battle in the demon realm battlefield. There might not be enough time. Kawa's assistants shouted at the top of their lungs, asking the Yuanying and primordial spirits to hold on as long as possible. On the other hand, the Heaven's Chosen cultivators asked their own cultivators to end the battle in the demon realm as soon as possible. Kawa was not distracted. She only focused on holding her breath and trying to start the dragon-slaying battle as soon as possible. On the other hand, the Heaven's Chosen cultivator was trying his best to hold on until the Yuanying arrived to help. It was not that he did not have confidence in his own team of masters, but that he wanted to reduce the cost as much as possible. If there were not enough masters in the upper realm, the impact on the battle would be very limited. Everyone was rushing for time. It was just that they were rushing for different places. On the battlefield, where the heavens-chosen cultivators were rushing, Zhou Xian was delaying. On the battlefield, where Zhou Xian was rushing, the heavens-chosen cultivators were delaying. But on the whole, the heavens-chosen cultivators had the greatest chance. This was because they had the advantage on many battlefields. Even in the demon realm, where the dragon could be slaughtered, they were confident in the strength of the heavens-chosen masters. The dragon-slaying battle was a battle of nearly 70 people. Zhou Xian's chess pieces might not be as many as Heaven's Chosen, but they had an advantage. This was because the Zhou Xian players were considered to be better at chess. Therefore, the surrounded cultivators would be suppressed to a certain extent. This suppression was between 20% and 30%. Zhou Xian only had one chance, and that was to slay the dragon. This was what Cao Hua was doing. In a dragon's eye position, the heavens-chosen cultivator was still constantly killing those who broke through the eye to enter. Even if he could not kill them, he had to make them exhausted so that they would not be of any use in the upcoming dragon-slaying battle. But no matter how he surrounded them, the first two spies who entered stood firm and ensured that the dragon-slaying battle would be successful. Hold on for another 2 hours. The dragon-slaying battle in the demon realm will immediately surround them. It will be your responsibility if you don't let a heavens-chosen Yuanying come up. Wait for another 2 hours. The masters will be able to cross realms to help you. Don't let the heavens-chosen Yuanying cross realms to harass the young master battlefield. Ancestral Master Bai Mei is already fighting 1 against 3. We can't add a few more Yuanying opponents. Cao Hua's assistants shouted themselves hoarse as they cheered for the human realm and immortal realm battlefield. It was in such an urgent atmosphere that the dragon-slaying battle in the demon realm began. A total of 34 black chess pieces were thrown in, and the white chess pieces surrounding the dragon and the 2 spies who broke through the eye only added up to 33 white chess pieces. This was a free-for-all battle. In a certain space of the heaven and earth chessboard, outsiders could not see it, including the players. Cao Hua slumped against the back of the chair. She felt that the mental effort she had put in these 10 days had even surpassed that of her upper-level true monarch. The ups and downs, the twists and turns, the torment back and forth made her feel the huge difference in mental pressure between a spectator and a real player. What should be done? She had done. What should be persevered? She had persevered. The rest could only be left to those 2 inexplicable spies. Who could it be? Or 2? Cao Hua suddenly felt something. Wasn't it 2? It was just like when she left. Looking at the solemn expressions of the surrounding cultivators and the oppressive atmosphere, Cao Hua's face bloomed with a bright smile. Don't worry, we'll win for sure. Chapter 1426. Everyone looked at perfected Lord Xiao Jia in confusion. Was she under too much pressure that she lost her mind? While perfected Lord Xiao Jia's chess skills were indeed impressive, what determined the outcome of the battle was not the chess skills, but the cultivators in the battle. Cao Hua looked at everyone's doubtful gazes and cracked a rare joke. 1,000 purple purples, all my assets. Who wants a bet with me? Cao Hua relaxed completely. That was because that person was back. There should be a spy from Taishan Middle Yellow as well. While she was just guessing, she was extremely confident in her guess. That was because this would satisfy the sense of ceremony and change of this guy's appearance every time. She wondered what senior brother Bai Mei's expression would be when he saw him. Senior brother guessed wrong. While this person was indeed a spy, at the very least, he was a spy who cherished old friendships. Time passed by the seconds and minutes. The Yuanying battlefield was the first to be decided. With the efforts of the remaining Yuanying, there were less than 400 of them left. Immediately after was the Essence Spirit battlefield. There were still 9 Essence Spirit perfected lords who lasted till the end. Just as everyone thought that the situation was set for Heaven's choice, the Een spirit battlefield in the Fiend realm changed abruptly. The battlefield disappeared, and at the same time, less than 100 Heaven's choice Een spirits were kicked out. The remaining 97 Zhou Xian Een spirits held their heads high. The cultivators of the three realms started to cross realms at almost the same time. Yuanying ran towards the Fiend realm, Een spirits ran towards the immortal realm, and Essence spirits ran towards the immortal realm. It was a race against time. Ascend to the immortal realm directly. If we can't find Heaven's choice's Essence spirit, we'll continue to ascend to the immortal realm. Lu Xiaoyi made the decision boldly, and the other Een spirits did not dare to disobey. This was not only because he had won over his companions in terms of strength, but also because of his huge influence in terms of reputation. If it was someone else, they might need to talk and scheme against each other. However, right now, Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian's reputation was widespread in the upper world of Zhou Xian, and they were in the limelight. This was the true emotion of the Zhou Xian people who had been besieged for 70 years. They longed for victory, longed for a hero, longed for a savior. They were all targets of the attack, but the fifth ring had already escaped. The ones who had contributed were the two freaks who had returned from Zhou Xian. No one would think that they were originally from the fifth ring, and no one would think that the people they led were all cultivators chosen by the heavens. They simply thought that since these two people grew up in Zhou Xian, they should be considered citizens of Zhou Xian. Instead of saving their families, they went to the distant fifth ring to act as heroes. There was actually a trace of emotion in his complaints, because Zhou Xian lacked such people. When the two of them appeared in the dragon-slaying battlefield this time, most of the true monarchs were free and unfettered cultivators. There was no need to say who they would listen to. They had battle experience, and most importantly, they had the reputation of always winning. After they finished off the heavens, chosen Een god in the demon realm, they had two choices. Should they wait for the heavens chosen Yuanying to appear and solve their problems before crossing the border? Or should they cross the border directly and ignore the heavens chosen Yuanying? Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian both chose to cross the border directly. For them, the heavens chosen Yuanying was only a small problem. The most important thing was how to stabilize the white brows and the other old fellows. If everyone rushed to the divine realm to fight, they would not be at a disadvantage. A seemingly safe method was to leave some of the perfected cultivators of the Een spirit realm to restrain the nascent soul stage cultivators. However, for Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian, who were used to risking their lives, this was the least desirable option. They preferred to play poker. Leave some people to restrain the Yuanying? How much? It was meaningless to leave too little, and it would increase unnecessary losses. If they left too much, they would not be a threat in the divine realm. They were in a dilemma. The key to the game was the divine realm. It was the sun god. Destroying the sun god was the only way to achieve the final victory. If they had enough Een gods, they could pose a big enough threat. What was the point of having too many Yuanying? There was a fundamental difference in the realms, and there was a prerequisite for ants to bite an elephant to death. This was the situation that the White Brows saw. The intrusion of the 9 true monarchs of heavens chosen shocked him. To be honest, taking on 3 young gods of heavens chosen was almost his limit. He could not hold on anymore. The Zhou Xian Yang gods were all shocked, while the heavens chosen Yang gods were all happy. However, this feeling did not last long. Next, a large number of nearly 100 Zhou Xian Een gods swarmed in. This time, their moods were immediately adjusted. The White Brows realized that Zhou Xian had a chance of winning. Whether or not there would be more Yuanying later, it did not matter which side they belonged to. With these 100 Een gods, the overall situation was set. The chaos became even worse because of the more than 300 heavens chosen Yuanying who entered later. However, the appearance of these people provided Lu Xiaoyi with a rare cover. He hid in the group of cultivators and silently observed the past and future of every heaven's chosen Yang god. He knew very well that the best way to break the deadlock was to kill a Yang god and make the heaven's chosen Yang gods feel threatened. Don't think that Yang gods are not afraid of death. It was just like how people looked heroic when they were young, saying that they would not be a burden to their families when they were old in the future. They would find a place to end their own lives and so on. In fact, they were just ignorant when they were young. When they were really old, they would look at them again. It was the same for Yang spirit cultivators. Although they had an almost immortal body, they cherished their lives very much. They used all kinds of means to hide their past and future. Rebirth seemed to no longer be an advantage, but a burden. This kind of mentality was not rare among Yang spirit cultivators, because they were only one step away from immortality and two steps away from immortality. The more this was the case, the more they were worried about gains and losses in the face of the supreme achievement of a cultivator. In battle, they lost their original aggressive style and became conservative. They did not seek merit, but only wanted to avoid mistakes. Protecting their past and future was more important than protecting their own lives. Not every Yang spirit cultivator was like this, but there must be some. Lu Xiaoyi was looking for such a Yang god, because in the demonstration of the Crow ancestor, there was a special way to deal with this kind of person. Taoist Yang Xiao was one of the three heavens chosen Yang gods who had attacked by Mei. In theory, if three Yang gods attacked one, such a battle should be very fierce and thrilling. However, on their battlefield, the battle scene was unusually calm. Some of the calm was the calm before the storm, and some of it was originally calm. Yang Xiao was a cultivator who specialized in the Taishu Taoism. Since the collapse of the Tablet of the Great Way, the basic power of his country had also slowly dissipated. It was not a big deal for the great cultivators, but more middle and low-level cultivators would choose other Xiantian Dao inheritances that were still alive. It was human nature to strive for greater heights and for water to flow to lower places. It was precisely because the foundation was not there that the cultivators of the Taishu lineage did not find it so difficult to compete for the general trend. Especially for the great cultivators of their realm, how to survive until the end of the era was more important than how to compete in the general trend of the universe. There were still thousands of years to go. By then, there might not be any serious inheritance in the Yuan kingdom. Who would he fight for now? Chapter 1427. With such a mentality, although Yang Chong had come to participate in this expedition against Zhou Xian, it was really hard to say how much effort he could put into it. Furthermore, his Tao orthodoxy was that of the Great Void. Hence, he fought very slowly. The battle between cultivators could not be compared with the anxious and pale faces of mortals. In many cases, it was normal for the winner to be happy and the loser to be happy. It was hard to imagine that two old fellows, who had lived for thousands of years and had thousands of years to live in the future, would give up their thousands of years of achievements and limitless possibilities because of some disagreement. The higher the realm, the different the thoughts. It was difficult to find a reason that could make them fight to the death with each other. In most cases, they had a tacit understanding with each other. This was the normal state of the cultivation world. Yang Chong was like this, and the other two Yang gods with him were not much stronger. The low-level cultivators fought to the death under the righteousness of the realm, but who knew that the upper-level cultivators were flirting with each other? Playing Taiping boxing? Of course, if you showed that you were weak, these people would definitely not let you go easily. But if you made them feel that you were very troublesome, it would be another matter. It was very naive to describe the relationship between these great cultivators as a life-and-death struggle. Bai Mei was very powerful. In the face of such an opponent, as a Yang spirit cultivator, no one dared to provoke his bottom line. This was the way to get along with each other. But Lu Xiaoyi was not a Yang god. In his eyes, although the battle between the Yang spirits and the divine realm was very fierce, since they came in, many of the Yuaning Yin spirits and primordial spirits had died. Only the existence of the main body, the 16 Yang spirits, had not been reborn. What he didn't know was that the truth was that since they entered the chessboard of heaven and earth, these young gods had not been reborn even once. It seemed that the young gods had pushed the key to victory and defeat to the bottom. But you couldn't really think that the battle between the young gods was ordinary, especially as the actual controller of the carefree travel. Bai Mei was arrogant and still wanted to do something. He had a reason to do something. There was a huge mountain gate behind him. Countless disciples were going through the test of life and death, his hometown behind him, and so on. However, White Brows was cunning. If he didn't attack the present, he would attack the past and the future. This was the exact opposite of the three Qins of Xin Yuan. The purpose of the three Qin dynasties was to kill you and make you suffer so much that you wished you were dead. Then, they would discover the secrets of your past and future. White Brows, on the other hand, left you in the modern world to judge your past and future. It couldn't be said that one philosophy was correct and the other was wrong. In fact, they were all right. As a genuine Xin Yuan swordsman, San Qin was extremely powerful in this world. Naturally, he had to play to his strengths and avoid his weaknesses. He used his powerful strength in this world to force out his opponent's past and future. Similarly, as an orthodox Taoist, the White Brow's strength lay in analyzing the past and future of others. In the present world, he did not have the ability to destroy everything. Therefore, he should first figure out the past and future of his opponents. Finally, he could make a sudden and ruthless move at a certain time. Lu Xiaoyi learned everything. He also had some foundation in carefree travel. He even had a deep discussion with White Brows on severing 3 lives. In his opinion, there was no severing 3 lives that was the best. There is only one that was most suitable for you. Therefore, he could roughly see the past and future of White Brow's 3 opponents. This was also a method that saved a lot of effort. Severing the past and future did not require as much effort as severing the present. Using White Brow's words, the swordsman's method was just foolishness. It looked powerful, but the efficiency was extremely low. Thinking about it carefully, it actually made some sense. When learning, one must not solidify one's thinking. One should not think that one was the best in the world and that one's sect was the best. One should be good at listening, especially to the opinions of other mainstream orthodoxies that were not so good. In White Brow's trial of severing 3 lives, he also discovered some very interesting things. For example, Xuanyuan's severing 3 lives relied on severing the present to find the rebirth point of the past and future. This was a direction. However, White Brow's ability could occasionally sever the past and future of 3 young gods chosen by heaven. Similarly, when a cultivator's past and future were severed, he also needed to find a basic point in the present to rebirth the past and future. The 3 lives were originally complementary to each other. If one was gone, the other 2 would be responsible for making up for the lack of rebirth. The past could make up for the present could make up for the future, and the future could make up for the past. Therefore, one could find a lot of interesting things. It was like the reference point of Yang Kuang's appearance. In fact, it was also the most important point of his appearance. The key was only relative. It referred to the fact that if this place was damaged, it might lose its appearance. However, cultivators were very cautious about this defense. If it was a swordsman like the 3 Qin, it was not important whether they knew this point or not. Because even if they did not know, with the attack power of the Yang God swordsman, they could achieve their goals in other ways. But for Lu Xiaoyi, it was very important, because he still did not have the attack power of the Crow ancestor, the Lu ancestor, and the 3 Qin when they were Yang gods. From observing the battle between different Yang gods to finally determining the 3 opponents of White Brows, it had only been a short moment. The heavy burden of commanding the Yin gods in battle was on Qing Xian's shoulders. The 2 of them had a tacit understanding. Lu Xiaoyi knew that he would definitely be able to do it, just as Qing Xian knew that he would open a gap in a Yang god. Hurry up, I'm under a lot of pressure here. The primordial spirit cultivators are easy to deal with, but the Yuanian group of Heaven's Choice is really a bit too many, and it's not easy to deal with them. If you can't kill the Yang God, then you might as well come back and help me, and make it easier for me. Qing Xian was an orthodox Taoist. He was usually courteous and elegant. However, as long as he was with this guy, he would unnaturally want to swear. He said that if he joined the battle of the Yin gods, with the strength of the swordsman, he would quickly gain an advantage over the primordial spirit of Heaven's Choice. Then, he would be free to deal with the Yuaniing. Although the time would definitely be slower, it would be safer. But this person did not want to. He insisted on provoking the Yang God to take a shortcut. Of course, there was a hint of jealousy in Qing Xian's dissatisfaction. For example, he did not have the ability to accurately predict a person's 3 lives. He did not know where this grandson had learned this ability. Was it the Sword Dao tablet? It must be. Their ancestors liked to cut people's 3 lives, and this had a deep historical inheritance. Lu Xiaoyi did not hide it. The Yang gods here are not easy to kill. They are all top experts of Heaven's Choice. Later, before we make a move, you have to come and help. The 2 of us together will let you have the fun of cutting the Yang gods' 3 lives. Qing Xian was very interested. This guy was finally tactful. He even knew that there was meat for everyone to eat together. He did not forget about him. Okay, tell me his past and future. Which one should I cut? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Cutting the hair's past and future. That's the white-browed old man's problem. The 2 of us can't do it. I'm talking about cutting the present world, our old profession. Chapter 1428. The battlefield was extremely chaotic, and no one could see what was going on for a while. There were often Jinjuan sneak attacks on the Yang spirit. Whether it was Zhou Xian's Yin spirit attacking the Yang spirit of Heaven's Choice, or the primordial spirit greeting Zhou Xian's Yang spirit, Lu Xiaoyi was not the only one who wanted to kill the Yang spirit and end the game. There were also many who knew how to read the 3 lives, but it was hard to say whether they could understand it or not. Everyone's pressure increased. In this chaotic battlefield, the most dangerous ones were the Yuaniing of Heaven's Choice. After all, there was a qualitative difference in the realm. In the sky full of Jinjuan, if they were not careful and were hit by the spells of the Yang spirit, it would be a tragic end. They could only target the Yin spirit of Zhou Xian, who was slightly stronger than them. However, under the instructions of Qing Xian, the Yin spirits did not try to fight them head-on. Instead, they took them to wander in the battlefield of the Yang spirit. When everyone was in danger, the difference in perception and vision of the Yuanian cultivators was revealed. They were often killed by mistake and died at the hands of the large-scale spells of their own Yang spirit. This was the result of not having high realm, but still having to fight. Lu Xiaoyi's idea was not necessarily to involve Qing Xian. The reason why he did this was that Bai Mei's opponent was 3 people, not 1. If he made a move, it would inevitably lead to the counterattack of the other 2 Yang spirits. No matter how confident he was, he did not want to put himself in such a dangerous situation. Therefore, cooperation was the way to go. There was only one chance, and that was when Bai Mei attacked Yang Yi. He could clearly feel that among the 3 Yang spirits of Bai Mei, he had a special liking for Yang Yi. This was a feeling that stemmed from his understanding of the Xiaoyao 3 lives / spell. The beginning of the change came from the sneak attack of the 3 Xiaoyao Yin spirits. Every Xiaoyao Yin spirit felt that they had the responsibility to share the pressure of their own sex ancestor Bai Mei, so they had always been harassing him. This time, the 3 Yin spirits were very smart to use a kind of secret formation of Xiaoyao travel, the heavenly wheel of freedom. The profundity of this move was that once the array was out, Patriarch Whitebrows could take over from it. There was no problem of cooperation. The old white-browed old man was very shrewd and ruthless. He made full use of the help of his disciples this time. When the heavenly wheel rotated, everyone was in a trance. They could only guard their minds and stabilize themselves. In just a few breaths of time, he had won the opportunity to kill Yang Yan alone. He had been watching Yang Liang's 3 lives for a very long time. Among the three yang spirits, the number of times he had cut the past and future was actually the least for Yang Chong. What was real was fake, and what was fake was real. Although he had cut the least, he was the one who could see the clearest. This was the special feature of the free-wandering three lives technique. With a flick of his finger, the carefree rebirth technique could be used to cut through the past and the future. Cutting through the past and the future did not require a powerful technique. The key was the mysterious technique. One had to be able to see it accurately and keep up with it mentally. This was the strength of the carefree travel orthodoxy. The most difficult thing for him was to slash the manifestation realm. The carefree travel orthodoxy was the same as all the orthodox Taoists. In terms of technique, they often did not pursue extreme evil and hysteria. They believed that this was not the essence of Taoism. The inch white ray was the most magical technique he had cultivated. It was also one of the few methods he was confident in breaking Yang Chong's defense. It was precisely because there were not many effective attacks in the manifestation realm that he had not put in much effort in the manifestation realm. He was also afraid that others would see the real situation and have a countermeasure. As soon as the white ray appeared, his wish was fulfilled. The qi entered his body. Almost at the same time, the carefree rebirth technique also attacked Yang Chong's past and future. The white-browed old man was confident. After more than 10 days of careful observation, he was confident that he could catch the truth of Yang Chong's past and future projection, but the manifestation realm that he was most worried about still had an accident. As a master of the Great Void, Yang Chong's emptiness realm attacks were all displayed on the outside, while his hidden emptiness realm was hidden deep within his body. The inch of white light was indeed very sharp and had broken through all of Yang Chong's external defenses. However, once it pierced into Yang Chong's body, it became silent and lost. The manifestation realm had failed. The white-browed old man had a feeling. If he missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to find another one. Just as the inch white ray appeared, two figures flashed into battle. One of them had a clear qi that surrounded Yang Chong in an instant. However, this kind of power was not enough to be fatal. It could be resisted by the Yang spirit. They were all from the same origin of Taoism. The three pure qi was no stranger to every Taoist Vedanta. There was only a bit of gray light in the clear air. It wasn't particularly conspicuous, but it was very ordinary. However, this ordinary light penetrated into Yang Liang's body like an inch of white light. What made him even more frightened was that it wasn't confused by a secret of the void realm. Instead, it directly rushed towards one point. It was a reference point that Yang Chong used to reproduce the past and future. Killing the reference point was the technique that the Crow ancestor and the Lu ancestor had shown several times in the Sword Tao stele. It was not effective for all Yang spirit cultivators, but it was especially effective for cultivators who played with the manifestation realm, used illusions, and walked the path of dexterity. With a muffled groan, Yang Chong's three lives were cut at the same time. He would never have thought that he, who seemed to be the safest among the three, would become the first Yang spirit to be annihilated. Before his Tao dissipated, he quietly watched as the two Yin deities scurried out of the room. The one who released the clear qi was just a smokescreen, for the sake of escaping now. The one who really did it was the flying sword. Swordsman, how could he have forgotten about them? The two bad seeds ran away after killing because the attacks of the other two Yang spirits would arrive soon. The so-called three pure qi of Qing Xian could only buy them a breath of time. At this time, there was only one person who could really help them. White Eyebrows. Old White Eyebrows had not communicated with him before, but he was very experienced and knew very well what he should do now. Stop them with the methods of the present world? There might not be enough time, and it was not his strength. What was his strength? It was still watching the three lives. Therefore, he still had to kill the three lives. Killing the three lives of these two Yang spirits was the most threatening thing he could do at the moment. It was not right to use a dagger to block the opponent's spear and broadsword. The right way to do it was to rub the body and stab. Of course, he still needed the cooperation of the two little spirits. He was not worried about this, because the two little guys had already shown extraordinary judgment in the surprise attack just now. Sure enough, the two retreating people did not blindly run away. As the two of them were escaping, they suddenly separated and turned around. Lu Xiaoyi's flying sword shot out, and Qin Xian's rainbow pierced the sun. He was going to confront the two Yang spirits. Should he fight? Should he fight? That was the question. For the two Yang gods, if they won, they would just take the lives of two Yin gods and avenge Yang Chong, whom they were not very familiar with. If they lost, thousands of years of cultivation would be lost. They would no longer have anything to do with the change of the era. Yang Chong's example was still there. What choice did they have to make? Chapter 1429. P.S. Fruit wanted to read 2 chapters at 11 o'clock, so I added it. It's the last draft. Fortunately, tomorrow is a new month, so I don't have to fight for this or that. I can have a good rest and relax. This month is a little tiring. Next month, don't rush me. I really have to think about the plot. I updated too quickly this month, and the quality has dropped a little. I'm sorry, everyone. Give Sloth a relaxed environment. And Sloth also hopes to contribute more wonderful works. Thank you to Orange Fruit. Thank you to all the friends who helped me. Thank you. The Yang God of Heaven's Choice died. The appearance of this situation was far more shocking than the death of hundreds of Yuanying immortals, because the Yang God could be reborn. In the previous 4 games, there had never been a situation where a Yang God died. Regardless of whether it was Zhou Xian who had failed 4 times or Tianze who had failed 5 times, the Yang spirits were all slacking at the level of the divine realm. Occasionally, they would be killed, but they would be reborn. No one dared to force the other into a corner. Only after the outcome of the battle in the lower 3 realms was decided would the disciples and grand disciples rush up. Only then would the side with more people win the final victory, and the side with younger disciples who failed to live up to expectations would leave in dejection. However, there would be no situation where a few Yang gods would rather die than surrender. Cultivators would never retreat in front of the great Tao in life, but they would not be aimless and brainless. After all, their sex orthodoxy was not dead yet, was it? They were not like the great Buddhas of the big and small intestines who had no way out. This was what Lu Xiaoyi had said. In terms of cruelty, the battle in the field was far crueler than the battle in Zhou Xian. Yang Liang was the first. This meant that there was a peak existence among the Zhou Xianyang gods who could easily sever a person's life. Considering that the white-browed god had done it while fighting against 3 people at the same time, the significance of this was quite terrifying. The remaining 8 Yang gods began to communicate with each other through their divine senses and began to have the intention to retreat. At the Yang god level, they were under a fatal threat. Among the disciples below, Heaven's Choice also did not have an advantage, and the situation was even getting worse. The strength of nearly 100 Zhou Xianying gods was much stronger than several primordial spirits of Heaven's Choice and 300 Yuanying immortals. There was no point in fighting such a battle. They would only become more and more passive. Xiaoyao Mountain became a sea of joy. No one had thought that the game of chess, which originally had little hope, would be played like this by the Xiaoyao cultivators. There were many things that were thought-provoking. The focus of the turning point was the Xiaoyao cultivator's sea. That last stroke of hers was a stroke of genius. What kind of courage and judgment did it take to hide the strongest chess piece at the very end of the most crucial moment? Jia Hua's face was flushed red as she was surrounded by her assistants. She went out with everyone to welcome the returning heroes. Of course, this included those nascent soul and nascent soul cultivators who had given their all even though they had failed. Victory belonged to everyone, not to a single person or group of people. At the very least, they had to adhere to this concept in their propaganda. The chessboard of heaven and earth dissipated, and the next battle would take place in a month. Whether it was the cultivators who had just come out or those who had already lost, the first thing they did after their joy was to ask around about their friends, fellow disciples, and fellow disciples. They wanted to know who had died in the battle and who had survived by luck. Among the excitement, there was also a faint sadness. This was not the end. In the future, they would have to experience this scene many times. Either Zhou Xian continued to stand tall, or the world would change. Lu Xiaoyi and Qin Xian did not say anything. The two of them, who were used to big scenes, no longer took these empty titles seriously. It was just a game of chess. The number of people was limited, and the tragedy was even more limited. Compared to the death battle between tens of thousands of cultivators in the blue sky, it was not on the same level. The two of them pretended not to know who killed Yang Chong. If Bai Mei did not say anything, they would not say anything. In fact, Bai Mei really would not say anything. This was not to take credit, but to put the blame on him. It would make the heavens' choice more afraid, and it would also save the two little guys a lot of unnecessary trouble. This was the responsibility of an elder. Even the two young gods who knew the truth might not say anything, because it was not nice to be killed by a sneak attack by a Yin god. What were the two of them doing? It was fine that they did not help Yang Chong, but why didn't they take revenge in the end? If they cannot stand up to scrutiny, they might as well pretend to be stupid. In the chaos, Lu Xiaoyi saw Kawa, who was smiling like a flower in the chaos. He opened his arms and hugged her. Of course, he hugged nothing, but he could not avoid the man's big hands holding the woman's hands tightly and shaking them. Qin Xian curled her lips to show her disdain. Those who had attended the party organized by Kawa suddenly realized that the little Yuanying did not lie to them. At first glance, they saw the woman's face full of rejection, and then looked at the fierce man's posture of wanting to force himself on her. Alas, people's hearts are not what they used to be, and the world is deteriorating day by day. What else can they do? As a little Yuanying said, other than pretending not to see, what else can you do? Senior sister, aren't you too cruel? You're just pushing me into a pit of fire. It was dark all around. Fortunately, I was lucky. Otherwise, wouldn't you be alone for the rest of your life? Kawa snorted coldly. You deserve it. Who asked you to be so used to being a spy that you can't get rid of the smell of a traitor? Well, since your performance is not bad, I will set up a table to entertain you and your friends in the evening. Lu Xiaoyi objected. Just me. He is not my friend, and he never drinks or feasts. Standing on top of Mount Xiaoyao and drinking the wind is enough. Qin Xian interrupted. I don't drink other people's wine, but I must drink Fairy Jia's wine. Different from when they were in the blue sky realm, the two of them kept a low profile here. They did not mention their role in turning the situation around in the chess game. Apart from a few Yin masters who knew about it, they hid themselves deeply. The two of them realized that this was a difficult race. The end was the change of the era, and the time was thousands of years. During this process, survival was the way to go, and not recklessly standing at the top without any safety rope. The hustle and bustle of Mount Xiaoyao continued. This was not something that could be finished in a day or two. Many cultivators were celebrating their victory. Many survivors were licking their wounds, and many were reminiscing about their lost faces. This was destined to be a sleepless night. In Jiahua's cave abode, there was a table full of medicinal dishes and the sweetest immortal wine. All of these were the handiwork of true monarch Greater and Lesser Jia, and they were the rewards that the victors deserved. They talked about the beautiful scenery of the blue sky realm, the interesting stories of the Five Rings, and the difficult and flawed life of a spy. However, they did not talk about the war. The more they talked about the war, the heavier it became. More and more people reminisced about it, but fewer and fewer people could sit together. When the wine was drunk, another uninvited guest came. Bai Mei barged in with the wine in his hand. Looking at senior sister Jia, who was still somewhat restrained, he could not help but laugh. Sit, sit. I am not a senior brother today, nor am I a sun god. I am just an ordinary, carefree old man who freeloads on food and drinks. There is no need to be so particular. Look at those two brats. They are not even moving. They don't look like they are meeting an elder. They look like they are meeting an old servant who has come to deliver wine. Chapter 1430. P.S. After the update at 20 o'clock tonight, nearly 200 people have contributed monthly votes to Sloth. I'm ashamed. I don't know how to thank him. Now Swordsman is ranked 10th on the monthly votes list. No matter what happens after 12 o'clock, Sloth will remember that he reached this position with your help. The result is not important. What's important is your support. There are too many names. I can't thank them all, but please believe me, I can see every one of you. With your support, Swordsman can be where he is today. The last hour or two is the world of data. We won't fight for it. Sloth has achieved his goal. Thank you. I won't pursue more updates. I'll focus more on quality. There's still a long time. Let's take it slow. At the start, the two true monarchs still had some misgivings. But slowly, under the impudence of the other three, they gradually let go of the so-called hierarchy and the rules of the sect, becoming unrestrained and unrestrained. In fact, in a sense, this was the true meaning of being carefree. But in this world of cultivation, when you faced elders who were several realms higher than you, how many could do this? After a few rounds of drinking, another uninvited guest came. It was the first elder of Taishian Zhonghuang, the chief yang god Xian. This table became more and more lively. Without any contact, one would think that these two yang gods in power were so serious and unapproachable. When one really got to know them, they were just two ordinary old men, the same vulgar jokes, the same bickering. But this time, the topic began to slowly shift to the general trend of the changes in the universe. They talked about the conflict between Taoists and Buddhists, the realm war, the chasm between the sects, the Zhou Xian's drawbacks, the heaven's choice, and of course some of the things that the Five Rings had displayed in this war. This was beneficial to everyone. What was insight? The vision of these two old monsters, who were almost 8,000 years old together, was insight. The heaven's choice was big but not good, and its structure was loose. Zhou Xian was conservative and muddling along. The Five Rings were rash and fanning the flames. The Taoists were idle and empty, and the Buddhists were unscrupulous. They were all laughing at them. There were young gods talking and laughing, and they were all Zhenjuan. Finally, when they talked about the chessboard of heaven and earth, Xian said seriously, "White brows. I've decided to give up the yellow in Tai Xian's round, and use all the elites of Tai Xian to mix with you, Xiao Yao Yu, and fight to the death in this round. Only in this way would Zhou Xian's luck not go downhill. The people's hearts are still there, and their fighting spirit is still there. What do you think?" Whitebrow laughed. "Old man, you finally understand. I've been waiting for you to say that for a long time. You and I have lived for almost 8,000 years, but we are not as clear as the little guys down there. The fact is, even if I, Xiao Yao Yu, survived this round and had a rising star like Xiao Yiqing Xian, I still wouldn't be able to face a serious heaven's choice. Failure in the next round is inevitable because we don't even have enough manpower. However, if you and I join forces, we will have a strong army. The next round will be very interesting to watch. Old man, when was the last time you and I worked together to defeat an enemy? Can your old body still hold up? Don't puff yourself up at your own cost." Old man Xian snorted. This old man can't do anything else, but dragging people along is no problem at all. 2, 3 young gods of heaven's choice, I can drag them along until the end of time. Our two clans are just the beginning. My intention is to drag Qingwei and Yuanshe into the game. Everyone can forget about the future games. Just take this round as the last one. In this way, Zhou Xian will have a reason to continue existing. White-brown nodded. That's right. Even bitter Zen Temple. If we continue to compete game after game, how can we compare to Heaven's Choice in terms of the number of cultivators? Only by joining forces and sending Heaven's Choice to continuous failure can we intensify the conflict between them and have the possibility of retreating. Otherwise, like now, if they can see the dawn of victory, they can always maintain this fragile balance. If this goes on, when will it end? Victory, continuous victory. boost their morale. As long as we win the next round, I'm afraid some of those clans won't be able to sit still. This was a very brilliant strategy that was far better than just trying his luck passively. In the continuous victory, they would slowly unite those cultivators who were unwilling to lose and form a force of inertia. Heaven's choice was actually very uncomfortable outside. Every time they failed, there would be a large number of cultivators who couldn't participate in the battle. When such a group of people exceeded a certain number, it was inevitable that conflicts would erupt. Taoist Xian drank a mouthful of wine. In the next game, it will be Heaven's Choice's turn to make a move. We have to defeat them to have the possibility of condensing Zhou Xian's will. Therefore, I was thinking that among the cultivators who will participate in the competition, we should choose those who have better skills. Since we can't just rely on our two sects, why don't we ask the Bitter Zen Temple for reinforcements? Whitebrow nodded. Good idea. Whitebrow, don't care about the so-called face. I want to see if Bitter Zen Temple can really put down their prejudice for Zhou Xian. As the two talked, they decided on their future strategy. As they talked, something seemed to be wrong. It turned out that in their plan, the two five-ring juniors who had never shown any fear were surprisingly quiet. One was asking for pointers in the Tao of pills with perfected Lord Dejia, and the other was whispering to perfected Lord Xiaojia. Whitebrow glared. You two are so cunning. We old people are here, racking our brains for Zhou Xian, but you two are hiding far away. One is asking for pills, the other is asking for beauties, and you're acting like there's nothing going on. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. The old people use their brains, while the young people use their hands. Isn't every war like this? With you two old people here, why should we worry about this? We're all good kids who are wholeheartedly seeking the Tao. How can we compare to the two old seniors? Chain of Ghosts. Qing Xian laughed dryly. Respecting one's teacher is the basic etiquette of us cultivators. What the two seniors are discussing is an important matter of the Zhou Immortal Sect. This matter concerns the movements of the entire sect and is of great importance. Us youngsters are narrow-shouldered and will only listen to orders. Old man Xian also spoke. How about this? Each of you come up with an idea. No one is allowed to leave it out. It has to be a decent idea. The two of you led thousands of reinforcements back from thousands of miles away. You even came into contact with the Buddhist sections. How dare you say that you don't have experience? Both of you are full of evil tricks, and your brains are full of vicious thoughts. Are you pretending to be pure people here? Big and Small Jia laughed. They laughed at the two fellows for pushing the blame away. They didn't understand that this was actually an expression of seeing through the nature of war. They weren't pretending to be virtuous, but they no longer had the ambition to do so. They would rather return to the state of being ordered around as small soldiers than to lead the so-called army. This was a change in mentality. It was difficult for outsiders to understand. Only those who had personally led the army would understand the profoundness of it. The so-called besieging of a city meant that you had to first walk in and then be able to come out. That was the real breaking of the wall. If you kept wandering outside the city, how could you have such a deep understanding? The elders had no choice but to force them. The two of them looked at each other, and Qing Xian spoke first. In my opinion, if we want to use the fifth board as the focal point of the battle, then the appropriate battle formation must be clear. The immortal realm of the primordial spirit must be stable. Don't ask for merit, just ask for no mistakes. It must be able to withstand the test of time. He had to endure until the next two rounds were decided, and then decide who was the winner. The mortal realm of the Yuanying realm must learn battle formations. Since it will be this group of people fighting the mortal realm in the future, then we should train a few people who are good at formations to coordinate on the spot instead of just relying on the commander's distant view. In this kind of confrontation between large armies, it's impossible to organize tactics accurately without understanding the situation. Finally, in the demonic realm, we have immortal Xiao Jia's superb chess skills and a person who is born with a good eye. You can just throw him in wherever is dangerous and important. I can guarantee that Candied Haws won't disappoint you. Chapter 1431. P.S. It's a new month, but Old Fallen has to wither for a period of time. I'm ashamed. I'll update 3 times a day, and I'll add 1 more, depending on the situation. Please give me time to sort out my thoughts. This debt, it's getting bigger and bigger. Quality is king. This is what Old Fallen doesn't want to give up, and it's also what you guys really need. Then, I'll wait for the day when I rise again. Finally, I'd like to thank my friends again for pushing Old Fallen forward in the last half an hour. Orange Fruit, Wenwu, Yu Xiao Yao, Taoist Master Xiao, Yunkai, Stephen, Brother Ho, 3Z, and so on. There are too many. Thank you for your support. Have a good read. Tong Ho Lu? Which one? Kawa asked the question on everyone's mind. Regardless of Lu Xiaoyi's threatening glance, Qing Xian did not hesitate to expose Lu Xiaoyi's past. He could see that with this person, you should take advantage of him whenever you can. If there was any dirty water, you should seize the opportunity to splash it. If it was too late, it would mean that this guy was disgusting you. You should not be soft-hearted and learn from a soft-hearted woman. Hence, after his explanation, everyone looked at him in surprise. As expected, swordsmen had a bloodthirsty tendency. However, as their cultivation level increased, some people would hide this tendency deeply, but the root of it would not change. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. How many years had it been since he had last explained this matter? Even though he knew it was futile, he still defended himself habitually. I'm scared of blood. Seeing everyone's uniform expression, the meaning was obvious. Do you think we're all idiots? Hence, he shut his mouth decisively. White brows did not let him off. Qing Xian is finished, but you haven't. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. He really had nothing to say. He came here because he was a brick, and he would move wherever he was needed. He never thought of playing a key role. He just wanted to do his best, just like the thousands of ordinary cultivators in Zhouxian. He did not want to be a leader. That was too tiring. He had to consider all aspects, the combination of martial arts, the feelings of the people, judging the situation, the balance of power, resolving disputes, and so on. It was even more tiring than being a parent. He would do it all again if he had nothing better to do. Things like this should be left to those who have the ambition to do it. What he needed to do was to fight based on his instincts. He had to say something else, otherwise the 2 old men wouldn't let him off. In my opinion, the Heaven's chosen ones are not fools. If they keep using Taoism to clear one stage and Buddhism to clear another, maybe they will still use Taoism next time. This was purely bickering because he could not think of any better suggestion than Qing Xian. Therefore, he purposely picked a quarrel. Didn't you say that it should be the Heaven's Choice Buddha lineage's turn to make a move for this stage? What if Heaven's Choice changed its tactics? It was no secret that Heaven's Choice's attack group was divided into 2 groups. Even their gathering camps in outer space were located in different airspace. Moreover, there were never any mixed groups of Taoists and Buddhists. They were either Taoists or monks. There were no exceptions. Heaven's Choice's attack style was to alternate between Taoism and Buddhism, regardless of whether they won or lost. Therefore, in the previous chess game, Xiao Yaoyu defeated the Taoists. Therefore, it should be the monk's turn next. This was a normal rotation. That was why old man Xian Xian said that they should find some cultivators who were proficient in dealing with Buddhism. Everyone's cultivation direction was different. Even within the same mountain sect, there were many different directions. Some focused on the internal confrontation of Taoism, some focused on balanced development, and some focused on Buddhism. Previously, the number of people in the Carefree Wanderer was not enough, so no matter what direction you were heading in, all of them had to be pulled up for a walk. Now, with the addition of a yellow and the Supreme Mystery, the number of cultivators had already exceeded 2,000. There's a lot of room for choice, so they could pick and choose. Lu Xiaoyi's bickering suggestion was to remind them that the Heaven's Choice ones were not blockheads. Couldn't they change their tactics? It was very reasonable, but it was completely unworkable, unless they had spies in the Heaven's Choice group. Old man Xian Xian stared at him. Your nonsense has made me spend a lot of time thinking. If Buddhism really takes the field, I'll teach you a lesson. This old man was very unreasonable, but he was old and had a high cultivation level, so he could only endure it. That night's banquet ended at sunrise. The two old men left together. Jinju and Jia returned to his abode to refine elixirs. Qin Xian had to return to Taishan Mountain. Lu Xiaoyi covered his head. "Oh, I drank so much last night that I can't handle it. Now, I only feel a splitting headache, and the world is spinning. Senior sister, can you lend me your gums so that I can recover from the alcohol?" He was kicked out, and the door of the abode behind him slammed shut. "You've been at Tianxiang Courtyard at the foot of the mountain, right? You're familiar with the place. Go there and relax. Someone will massage your legs and feet. Don't you always say that you like this kind of big sore the most? I only have a scoop of cold water and a bucket of ice dregs here." Lu Xiaoyi left with his hands behind his back, not caring about the various gazes around him. He wondered if he should strike while the iron was hot and go to Jinju and Jia to ask for some elixirs, but he decided against it. He also had some private matters to attend to. He had to go back to Yao Ying to take a look, and at the same time, check on Huang Ting's confidant. She had lost the battle. Maybe she needed a shoulder to lean on? Maybe he could take advantage of her weakness, knock on her door, and rekindle old feelings? He had been cultivating for more than 1,000 years, and he had experienced a lot. He was very strange. In the world of cultivation, why hadn't he met anyone who was fickle? Was he asking for too much? Or were all the Kuan cultivators this time the clean type? Thinking about it, the most realistic thing was probably to go down the mountain and wash his feet first. He didn't know if there was a discount for the heroes of the chess war. Would they pay for it? However, he didn't think about it at all. With such fame and strength, what couldn't he do with others? It wouldn't be difficult for him to participate in a few spiritual gatherings and get to know some young Kuan cultivators who worshipped heroes. Why did he have to rack his brains to figure out how to reveal some information about the participants when he was washing his feet just to get a discount? His brain circuits were strange. However, it could also be the reason why so many senior sisters still treated him as family despite his debauchery. There were things to do and things not to do. In his heart, he could only do something if he spent money. This was his principle. He, Lu Xiaoyi, had always been a man of principle. Lu Xiaoyi patted his butt and left to rekindle old feelings. He took advantage of the situation and left Xiao Yao Mountain behind. However, this place had become the most lively place in Zhou. This was because Huang Ting and Zhou had announced that he would give up on his own game and fully support Xiao Yaoyu's game. He would not allow Heaven's Chosen to win more than half of the 9 games. This was not an easy decision to make, because this meant that Huang Ting and Taishan had given up his own honor. Of course, there were no shallow cultivators. They knew that Taishan was willing to be a vassal of Xiao Yaoyu in order to stop Heaven's Chosen from advancing. However, Bame was not easy to deal with. He immediately changed the name of his team. It was no longer called Xiao Yao Chess Game, but Zhou Deciding Game. Such a move immediately received the full support of the entire upper realm of Zhou. Those with talents offered, those with pills offered, and those with treasures shared. For the first time, the chess game was no longer limited to a certain sect, but truly became a chess game for everyone in Zhou. It was related to everyone. There was no distinction between one and the other. This was the goal that the two old foxes, Bai Mei and Xian, wanted to achieve. They wanted to start with the 3,000 little lands and force Qingwei, Yuanshi, and Bitterzhen to join in. Chapter 1432. The ones who were most easily moved were those small sects and forces. Among the upper sects that could participate in Zhou, apart from Xiaoyao Travel and Taishan Middle Yellow, there were also Qingwei, Yuanshi, and Bitterzhen Temple. These 3 sects had strong wills and a long history. They wouldn't change their minds easily. Therefore, even if Taishan Middle Yellow decided to join the Xiaoyao chess game, they only thought that it was a compromise because Taishuan's strength wasn't enough to support an independent game. They were different from Taishan Middle Yellow. Each sect had the absolute strength to deal with the game alone. Therefore, this could be Taishuan's choice, but it definitely shouldn't be their choice. However, they could think this way, But the small sects under these three sects might not think this way. Every upper sect had 330 little lands under them, and they needed to play a small game. Now that the yellow of Tai Xian had given up, the little chess game under it was naturally no longer meaningful. Among those cultivators who were free, those who were hot-blooded, those who had strength, and those who had pursuits, naturally flocked to the carefree mountain. Even if there were only a few cultivators in each small continent, when added together, it was a huge number. That wasn't all. The total number of little Lu clans under Qing Wei and the other two clans amounted to 1,000. Their willpower wasn't as firm as the three upper sects. Many of them had their own ideas and were confident in their abilities, so they came here to contribute their strength at this solemn moment. Xiaoyao Mountain couldn't even gather 2,000 people for a game. In the end, it was Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian who benefited. Now, the situation was reversed. Xiaoyao sect, Taixian sect, Taixian sect, Taixian sect, Taixian sect, Taixian sect, Taixian sect's 300 little lands, and other little lands. Together, there were tens of thousands of people. You had to choose 1 out of 5 to have a chance to play the game. People were like donkeys. They wouldn't leave even if they were chased away. No one came when the quota was unlimited. Now that the quota was in demand, they rushed in large batches. It was also in the hearts of the people. And it was also in the hearts of the Zhou Xian people who had been suppressing the fire in their hearts for more than 70 years. They couldn't bear it anymore. They couldn't retreat anymore. They couldn't bear it anymore. It was just this game. Whoever died would die. This was the true mentality of most people. At least now, they still had the feeling of generosity. If they were really pushed to that point, they would feel discouraged. The more people there were, the more important thing was that they could cheer each other on. Being able to erase the shred of cowardice in everyone's hearts was like having countless new recruits standing beside veterans on the battlefield. This was more effective than any kind of training. The plan was very successful, exceeding the expectations of the two old foxes. Therefore, the two of them spent most of their energy on selecting people. The carefree cultivators made up a portion of them. They were the survivors and had experience. The supreme Xian cultivators made up a portion of them. They were the fresh troops. A portion of the small sects and clans were the real elites. Those who were not outstanding could not be selected at all. The remaining Qing Wei primordial cultivators from the previous chess game were also unwilling to leave. Of course, they were elites. Elites who had survived and had battle experience. Based on this calculation, if you wanted to squeeze into the next game of Go, it would be impossible if you didn't have the ability to do so. It was no longer a situation where even true Monarch de Jia was pulled up to make up the numbers. 2,000 people, all of them outstanding people who were good at fighting. In terms of strength, at least at the level of Yuanying and true Monarchy Master, they were at least one level stronger than the previous game. However, the upper echelons of the two upper sects were not careless because of this. They could make up the numbers, but so could Heaven's Choice. Moreover, they were very sure that the situation here had already been leaked out of the atmosphere by spies. This was inevitable and unavoidable. Therefore, their true trump card was not these stronger participants. They were strong, but Heaven's Choice was also strong. The relative gap between them and Heaven's Choice was not widening. Their true trump card was, "You are still the main player for this game." Bai Mei looked at Ka Hua calmly and announced the decision of the upper echelons. There were many reasons why Ka Hua was chosen as the main player in the previous game. For example, the carefree cultivators did not have enough manpower and so on. But now, the carefree cultivators had enough manpower. Although Ka Hua was very good at Go, she could not afford to be unrivaled. There were many true monarchs who had a higher realm than her, better skills, and sharper foresight than her. Why did they still choose her? It was not because she won the previous game. It was because of the ambiguous relationship between this woman and someone else. Their true trump card was the two spies from the fifth ring, especially that swordsman. Bai Mei reminded her, "You are the player. I should not be telling you what to do or not to do. But the situation now is a little special, so I will say a few more words. Of the four realms of Go, the Mo realm is always the most important. You've also felt this in your heart. You don't have to worry about the Yang spirit. We have other plans for the primordial spirit. Yuanying, as long as we are strong enough and have enough fighting spirit, we will not lose much. But the battle between the Yin spirits and the Mo realm has a huge impact on the overall trend of the game. You saw it in the previous game, so you should know that I'm not lying. Therefore, there are two pieces that are very important to the use of. You have to know what to do. Kawa understood very well. I know, Xiaoi and Qing Xian. Bai Mei nodded satisfactorily. Tell me, what do you think? Kawa already had a plan. Qing Xian is very strong, but I value his organization and coordination ability more, so I will send him in the crucial dragon-slaying battle. It will be the deciding factor. Xiaoi? Then there is no need to say. When we are sure to lose, we will throw him into the opponent's eyes. Everything will be fine. Bai Mei laughed. That was the logic. Although it was crude, it was not crude. If someone else threw this kid in, he might have a rebellious mentality. It was possible that he would work, but not put in effort. But this kid had a perverted, strange habit of having a crush on his senior sister. His eyes were sharp. Well, if he still cannot handle it, he could also send a mortal to Jia. He would make sure that the kid would listen to him obediently and not do anything wrong. He was very pleased. The tiger that he had been secretly cultivating finally showed its fangs. Finally, he rushed back when Xiaoyao was at its most critical time. His hundreds of years of cultivation were not in vain. He did not forget about him in all the important events. The only bad thing was that this kid was a little unreliable. He had also prepared some of his core experiences of reading the 3 lives. He wanted to cooperate with this guy in the chessboard a few more times and make a few more Yang spirits. Where did this kid go? Qing Xian is already back. Why is he not here? That yowling little Lu is fine. How much time does he need? Kawa reported, after that banquet, he went down the mountain to fool around for 3 days. First, he went to Yaoling. Then, he went to Huangting Mountain. He probably went to find his old lover. By May's side, Xiaojie, you have to change. You can't go on like this. Chapter 1433. At this moment, Lu Xiaoi was a guest at Huangting Mountain. The entire Huangting Mountain was quiet. Naturally, it wasn't as noisy as Xiaoyao Mountain, nor was it as panicked as other places. It was how it should be. It was a silence that seemed to have seeped into the bone marrow. Of course, you could also say that it was old-fashioned. A quiet mountain, a quiet orthodoxy, and a quiet person, just like the woman in front of him. When she bent over to pour tea, her beautiful curves didn't cause any ripples in his heart. On the contrary, he also became quiet in this mountain and this person. He understood another woman, and his mouth was no longer as glib. This was the effect of the environment. Of course, it was the environment that he recognized. Xiaoi, I just found out your real name. Unfortunately, it didn't come from your mouth. Xiao Bingji's voice was soft, and one couldn't tell whether she was happy or angry. However, Lu Xiaoi knew that there was a strong. I didn't tell anyone in Zhou. This isn't a matter of trust. In fact, we were discovered on the first day we came to Zhou. I just don't want to bring trouble to people I know. A lot of trouble. That's not something you should bear. In fact, he said this to tell the woman in front of him. He also didn't tell Inya or Kawa. This was what a woman wanted to know the most. Even if they didn't come out on top, at least they weren't at the bottom. In the chessboard, I'm also a player. Unfortunately, I'm not as lucky as Kawa. Lu Xiaoi looked at her gently. I counted the days. When you Huangting were fighting the chessboard, I was still on my way to the 5th ring. I'm sorry that I didn't help you when you needed it the most. Xiao Bingji smiled. You don't have to apologize. I'm not blaming you. It's just a free combination of factors. Huangting Taoism doesn't care about this, and I don't care either. We've already done our best to win once. Since we've worked hard, why should we be disappointed? Lu Xiaoi sighed. I've already experienced the mentality of everyone in Huangting. That's what a true orthodox Taoist should be like. Xiao Bingji shook her head. We don't care because we can only do so much under the rules of the world. However, if the chessboard of heaven and earth was broken, the only sect among the 9 great sects that would rather die than submit would be the Huangting Taoism. We don't care because we've already made the final decision. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Why do I feel the pressure on my shoulders getting heavier? Xiao Bingji laughed. Little E, if you don't feel any pressure, you won't be bothered to move forward. That's how it is in Little Rusty Land. Eating, drinking, and having a wife are your greatest contentment. The two of them were silent for a while as they recalled that short memory. It was so beautiful, yet so unattainable. Neither of them mentioned Enya because this little princess had already given up everything she had in the chess game. Even though she had the most profound background in Huangting Taoism, it still couldn't change everyone's fate. This helplessness couldn't be changed by one's will. No matter how many treasures you had, you couldn't escape the heavenly Tao's abandonment of you. I want to go to Little Rusty Land to take a look. I heard that there's already some spiritual opportunity there. Although it's not enough to give birth to cultivators, the weather is good, and the vegetation is rich. Lu Xiaoyi agreed readily. Okay, I want to go and take a look too. The two of them left as soon as they said so. They didn't have much to worry about. As they traveled through the sea of clouds, they couldn't help but recall the carrying pole flying spiritual tool. Unfortunately, things were still the same, but people had changed. It was already unbalanced to sit on it again. For the two of them who had the cultivation of a true lord, this distance only took a few minutes. This was the speed at which they were taking a leisurely stroll. Little Rusty Land, the place where the two of them fell and lost their memories, was actually the place where Lu Xiaoyi became a nascent soul. The spiritual opportunity that was created by him, but there was no need to talk about it. First, they came to Little Bottom Village. The Lioha River was still there, but the village had changed a little. There were more people, the houses were newer, and the children's laughter was louder. After so many hundreds of years, they couldn't find where Little Bun's family was, and there was no need to look for them. Everyone had their own traces of life. You couldn't say that being a cultivator or an immortal was the most ideal. The most suitable one was the best, especially for people like Little Bun who didn't have the potential to cultivate. They followed the road out of the village and soon came to the county. To their surprise, the pawn shop was still there. Although it had been renovated several times, its general appearance hadn't changed. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Look, you still left in a hurry. You didn't even know to take the things you pawned. Luckily, I'm smart. Xiao Bingji glanced at him. Are you smart? Half of the things you pawned were secretly swapped, and you still have the nerve to say that. Lu Xiaoyi was startled and couldn't help but laugh. I was actually cheated by a mortal. I was wondering how this pawn shop could survive for hundreds of years. With this ability, it won't go bankrupt. As they chatted and laughed, they continued to walk forward. Of course, they wouldn't do anything because of this. To cultivators, the past was the past. To settle old scores with mortals, how calculative would one be to do such a thing? They saw the slope again, but it had changed. It was no longer steep. Of course, there were no more men who relied on the mountain to survive. Here, they began to realize that they weren't ordinary people. When they came to the prefectural city, they walked around the mansion where the two robbed the rich to help the poor. They recalled the ugly incident where the two clumsily jumped high and fell into the courtyard. Now that they thought about it, it was really a simple joy. There was no time to be so simple. That inn was one of the best rooms here. Someone's trick of coaxing and cheating finally worked. Xiao Bingji stood for a long time before saying indifferently, Little E, you had a purpose from the beginning, right? Lu Xiaoyi didn't avoid it. Yes, I probably belong to the kind of people who matured early, Xiao Bingji sighed. This wasn't maturing early, it was simply a bad thing in the womb. The two of them finally arrived at the nameless mountain peak. The scenery here was still the same, but the shed that was once built was long gone. However, the bluestone that the two of them used as a chessboard to play chess was still there. Although it was covered in moss, it still couldn't escape the two's divine sense. There were two large words written on it. Liar. They stood in the wind for a long time without saying a word. The past flashed through their hearts. The past was the past, and it was no longer there. Cultivation changed a person's path. If the two never recovered their memories, they might have been a big family on this small land by now. Who knew which kind of life was better? I'm leaving. Take care. Xiao Bingji gazed at him and turned around. Take care. Lu Xiaoyi replied softly. It was all over. It was really over. It was a bit sad, but also a bit relaxed. On the path of cultivators, they had to learn to let go. This was a necessary condition to go further. Chapter 1434. P.S. Yesterday, the monthly votes list fluctuated a few times. The sword soldiers were on a roller coaster ride around the top 10. They could not control themselves. I want to thank many people. The Milky Way Alliance made the final decision and the support of the various alliances. But today I want to thank these most ordinary readers. Their net worth might be average, and they were all workers, but when old depraved needed help the most, they silently lent him a helping hand. Hundreds of 1,500 points or multiples of 1,500 points made old depraved feel emotional for a long time. Elmwood Apple, Happy Day, Wind Kite Stars, I Raise My Glass to Drink Up the Wind and Snow, Childhood Aqua Blue, Raging Flame, Awkward Muzwo Lang, Uncle Kangwu Liang, I Want to Be Great God, Dragon's First Moon, Pighead 987, Jack Zhang, Big Ice and Bear Mad, Wang Dachui Without a Hammer, Sword Hidden in the Heart, Tai Coco, Internet Celebrity Swordsman, Gush Xiaoluan, Chaotic Truth, Game of History, Friend 2019, Come Back Lightly, Safe Little Fresh Meat, Rose Enchanted, Little Nine's Cat Sword, Disciple Book Friend 2019, Beauty is My Love, Book Friend 16031319033333395, Boss Sue, YYZY4444, Stella 18, 7 Pairs of Girls' Shoes, Thorns Don't Want to Become a Crown, Old Hook, Duke of Zhou Spit Out the World, Return to Heart 753, Idler from Home, Ask Yarawashian, I Am Originally Ferocious, Yugazishin, Spirited Q, Murray, Guilmin Zhong City, Windrunner on the High Mountain, Is 30 Enough, CD Little Fish, Water Green Demon, Nitra Mushroom, King Ju, Bookworm, 10,000 Leaf Grass, Catch Alive, Pork Rib Soup, Eat Meat, Touch Blind Paste, Nien Nu Jiao, Avicii, and many, many more, including some alphanumeric brothers. Oh my God, I can't write anymore. If I continue, I'll be told that my word count is too low. Old Depraved saw everything and remembered it in his heart. Thank you all. Without you, the sword soldiers wouldn't be where they are today. Only by updating diligently and putting quality first will I be able to repay you. Thank you. You still know to come back? Senior Brother Whitebrow asks about you almost every day. Kawa was very dissatisfied, but there was nothing she could do about this mischievous fellow. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Only those who cared about you would blame you. However, there were fewer and fewer people like that. He had to cherish the present. Senior sister, I saw that you were bored playing chess by yourself, so I found a guy for you to pass the time. Kawa had seen this thing before, and they got along quite well. Kawa was very happy. Little Meow, I heard that you went to the 5th Ring Road. I was worried about you. Don't follow your senior brother around in the future. It's very dangerous. Don't be fooled by the fact that you have 9 lives. With some monsters, even 90 lives won't be enough. Lu Xiaoyi found the white brows. He also had some questions to ask. Now that the battle was in full swing, Zhou Xian needed his help. Otherwise, the old man would not refuse to answer his questions, but he would definitely give Lu Xiaoyi all kinds of tests and missions. He even said that there was no such thing as a free lunch in the cultivation world. Senior brother, what do you think about the modern world reference point? Was this normal? If so, then wouldn't the datum of the present world be a cultivator's fatal weakness? Good question. Since you can notice the modern world reference point, it means that your breaking 3 lives ability has reached a higher level. The white brows nodded. What Lu Xiaoyi asked was a very important part of the breaking 3 lives ability, but it was also very easy to be overlooked. For secret knowledge like this, unless a trusted disciple had made a great contribution, it would not be easily shown to others. The White Brows also subconsciously wanted to find some of the most troublesome problems in the sect recently to make things difficult for Lu Xiaoyi. However, when he thought of the current difficulty of the chess game, he gave up the idea of making things difficult for Lu Xiaoyi. Forget it. Since he wanted the horse to run, he had to feed it at night. The modern world reference point. Ordinary people usually use this to find their opponent's past and future, but they often forget that there are also modern world reference points. However, modern world reference points do not necessarily mean that they are weaknesses. These are two different concepts. Just because you successfully killed Yang Yin, you can't think that this method is applicable everywhere. This is a wrong idea. The White Brows pointed at him. Generally speaking, the more illusory and spiritual the technique is, the more likely it is that their modern world reference point will be like Yang Yin, which will become a weakness. However, for those whose modern world reference point is very tough. To put it bluntly, it is the body itself, like the meridians or the swordsman's sword. For most Taoists, the way of the middle is between the two, but it is not easy to judge what is real and what is fake. For example, you swordsmen cut the modern world reference point to find your opponent's past and future, while I Taoists cut the modern world reference point to find the foundation of the modern world reference point. In fact, it is the same principle. You were able to kill Yang Liang. The smartest thing you did was to choose him out of the three Yang spirits and not the other two. As the two discussed the modern world reference point, the preparations of Shaoyao Mountain were slowly taking shape. In fact, the choice of Yang God was the simplest, and the choice of Primordial Spirit Lord was not difficult either. However, it was more troublesome to choose a large number of Yuanying and Yin gods. What really troubled White Brow and Xian Xian was whether the Heaven's Chosen One was a Taoist or a Buddhist. If they could not be sure, they could not target and could not choose the most suitable person. Unfortunately, the chess pieces that Zhou Xian had planted among the Heaven's Chosen One were not high enough and could not come into contact with such high-end secrets. The Heaven's Chosen One always had two teams, one Taoist and one Buddhist. No one knew who would attack until the last moment. That was something that could only be decided by a limited number of Yang gods. It was not that they did not have a trump card. They had borrowed 50 elite Yin gods from the Bitter Zen Temple. Their purpose was to have the means to fight against the Buddhists in the battle of Yin gods in the demon realm. When the opponents were all monks, it was actually very difficult to fight a team battle, especially in the demon realm Go game. The Buddhist monks' various Buddhist enchantments were very annoying. These could only be dealt with by the ascetic Zen monks who were also Buddhists. Yes, White Brow and Xian Xian still assumed that the opponents were monks this time. This was because the Heaven's Chosen One had only lost one game in the Carefree Mountain. It was still within the rules and should not change so quickly. A month later, the Carefree Mountain was packed with people. Whether or not they were participating in the battle, many cultivators came here. This was because this was the first time that Zhou Xian had two upper sects to attack together. Whether this method was feasible or not depended on the result of this game. Auspicious clouds lingered and auspicious air filled the air. This time, White Brow did not mobilize before the battle. There was no need for that. The 9 Yang gods were all present. The 40 primordial spirits were all selected. The Yin gods were all present and full of energy. The Yuanying were all elites and were in high spirits. If they could not win before the Heaven's Chosen One paid attention to this arrangement, then there was really no need for Zhou Xian to continue defending. The heaven and earth chessboard shook. Amidst the thunderous cheers, the cultivators filed in. Because there were many experienced veterans in the team, the entire team of 2,000 people was very calm. It was Buddhism. The judgment of the two old Yang gods was right. Fortunately, they did not listen to someone's nonsense. Kawa was calm and natural. This victory gave her a strong confidence. In the chess game of the demonic realm that she presided over, the 200 Yin gods had several trump cards. With the overall command of Qing Xian's dragon-slaying plan, the tit-for-tat of 50 ascetic Zen Buddhas, and Zhou Xian's biggest shit stir, there was no reason to lose under such preparations. This time, she guessed the black chess piece and decided to attack. May momentum. No more stingy digging for scraps. The star position was Tian Yuan. This was Ka Wa's momentum. At the same time, several other battlefields started fighting at the same time. The Yang gods in the deity realm were still dawdling, especially the heavens chosen Yang gods, because the opponent Zhou Xian had a Yang god who was very good at severing 3 lives. On the primordial spirit battlefield in the immortal realm, the two sides fought steadily and did not easily cross the line. This was a tacit understanding between the two sides. They both placed the main battlefield that would decide the outcome of the game in the demonic realm. The Yuaning in the mortal realm were once again mixed together, but Zhou Xian's Yuaning this time were obviously stronger than last time, and many of them had experience fighting against monks. Although the heavens chosen monks had strengthened themselves after knowing about Zhou Xian's changes, the two sides were evenly matched. Judging from a situation, it was going to be a long battle. The only variable was the demonic realm go. Kawa was full of confidence and moved quickly. The opponent did not show any weakness and was tit for tat. He did not take the position just because Kawa took the momentum. Instead, he also used the momentum to fight against her, showing his firm determination to confront her. If they both took the momentum, the battle was inevitable. Before they entered the middle game, the two sides started fighting in several places. For a moment, the whole game was entangled, and there was not a single piece that was guaranteed to survive. Chapter 1435. It was Kawa's first time playing such a straightforward game of strength, because she had the guarantee of playing this game. She did not have to worry about the strength of her chess pieces, nor did she have to worry about a player that she could not get rid of. What was there to be afraid of? If I can't get rid of you, I'll let go of Xiaoyi. Several large dragons rolled and rolled towards the center of the abdomen, entangling with each other. Amidst the encirclement and interception, you break me, I block you. The game between the first and second pieces had never stopped. In this process, there were also pieces that Jia Hua couldn't get rid of, but there were also pieces that Zhou Xian couldn't get rid of. It was precisely because of these variables that the entire game of chess became more exciting and more exciting. Everyone had the opportunity to kill the opponent's dragon, and everyone had the opportunity to kill back. The collision of qi was also between the first and second chess pieces. It was impossible to calculate precisely. It could be because a chess piece was difficult to get rid of, and victory or defeat kept changing in the process. One moment, Zhou Xian had the advantage, and the next moment, Heaven's Choice had the lead. The dragons kept switching back and forth between turning from danger to safety and losing again, leaving the spectators on tenterhooks and unable to predict what would happen next. In such a tense atmosphere, the qi between the dragons became tighter and tighter. They started to withdraw their qi. Pounce, bump, touch, connect, hit, rob, all kinds of moves emerged. The back and forth between the first and second chess pieces was even more frightening. The other battlefields were calm like water, but the demonic territory was full of murderous intent. Everyone could see that the other 3 battlefields were no longer meaningful. The victory of Yuanying was definitely after Yin Shun, and the direction could not be determined. As long as one side won in the demonic territory and rushed up, the primordial spirit battlefield in the celestial territory would immediately turn from balance to reversal, and then rush up to the celestial territory. The demonic territory was the eye of the game. Kawa was weighing the pros and cons. Which dragon should she kill first? She had to make a decision because this meant which battlefield she would put Qing Xian into. Since the start of the game, in the process of mutual chess pieces, Heaven's Choice had failed 3 times, and Zhou Xian had failed 4 times. This meant that Heaven's Chosen had also invested their elite forces in the demon realm's Yin God battlefield. Zhou Xian's cultivators were chosen from the teams of Carefree Wanderers, Tai Xian's Middle Yellow, and Rogue cultivators. On the other hand, The Heaven's Chosen One was probably chosen from a dozen or so great nations. There was still a gap between them, but it was not obvious. She didn't need to use Lu Xiaoyi, this killer weapon. In fact, the best time to use Lu Xiaoyi was when one side had completely lost all hope. Then, he could use it to reverse the situation and make the final decision. But now, there were several dragons of different sizes. If he used it rashly, he might be able to decide the life and death of one big dragon, but he wouldn't be able to decide the direction of the other big dragons. What she was thinking about now was how to put Qing Xian into the little white dragon that was about to enter the killing chess. Or would it be the great white dragon that had more than 30 members? This was a difficult choice to make because the small dragon was also related to the large dragon, and the large dragon determined the small dragon. She wasn't the only one making a choice. Heaven's Chosen player was also making a choice. It was safer to kill the small dragon, but it was more risky to kill the large dragon. Seeing that the opponent's last move was to pounce on her tiger eye, this move was a useless move, because as long as she removed this chess piece, the fate of her great white dragon would be released. This wasn't a normal move in a normal chess game. Only cultivators would play like this, because the opponent's only reason for doing so was that he thought she couldn't remove it. This chess piece should be the most powerful one among the Heaven's Chosen One. She had a lot of adaptations. The simplest one was to use Xiaoyi to remove it. But the disadvantage of doing so was, what if the opponent was playing tricks? What if this time, she stuffed a cannon fodder into the tiger eye? It was equivalent to using her most powerful trump card in a place where there were only a few gains and losses. In an instant, the opponent helped her make a decision. Since the opponent was betting on the small dragon, she would bet on the large dragon. So, she didn't care if the opponent's next move was to kill the children. She commanded Qing Xian to throw the large dragon into the killing chess. At this point, both sides had no way out. They could only bite the bullet and continue. One in front and one behind. The Heaven's Chosen One killed the small black dragon, and Zhou Xian killed the large white dragon. In the small battlefield, Zhou Xian's black chess piece was considered to be killed by the Heaven and Earth chessboard, so its strength was only 70 to 80% of its original strength. Similarly, because it was considered to be surrounded and killed in the big battlefield, more than 30 white chess pieces were also limited to 70 to 80% of their original strength. Among them, more than 10 chess pieces were actually in a state of 2 battlefields. It was a mess, it was all a mess. Kawa had done her best, and the rest could only be left to the chess pieces, the carefree people, the Taishan people, the bitter Zen people, and the rogue cultivators. And Qing Xian, whom she had high hopes for, to be friends with Xiaoyi and come here from the distant 5 rings to be spies. Their strength couldn't be weak. Especially, this was a cultivator with the calm demeanor of a general, much more reliable than Lu Xiaoyi. As for Xiaoyi, she was best at doing unexpected things, stirring up trouble in the most unlikely places, but in some places she was sure of, she liked to be clever and risky. The battle started at the same time. No one could see it, so they could only wait anxiously. In the distance, more than 10 Qingwei primordial yang spirits were still watching, and one of them sighed, "This girl is good at playing chess. She has imagination and dares to fight." Originally, if our Zhou Xian Yin spirit chess pieces were stronger, the situation wouldn't be so stalemate. But previously, she failed once more, and this is terrible. If it were our disciples, we wouldn't be so passive. Another Yang spirit asked, "The risk is greater than the opportunity to gamble like this. There are fewer little dragon people, so the time to end the battle will be shorter under normal circumstances. Has she joined the 2 5-ring spies? Otherwise, she wouldn't be so desperate." In everyone's guess, the battle was fiercely going on in 2 spaces, testing everyone's nerves and determining the overall situation of Zhou Xian's defense in the future. If this battle was lost, Xiao Yu and Taishan Zhonghuang would be eliminated at the same time, which was an unacceptable loss. But Kawa wasn't too worried, because in her layout, Qing Xian wasn't the only trump card. In fact, the reason why she dared to let the more than 10 little black dragons be besieged was because she knew that they were all ascetic Zen monks. This was an arrangement she had made in secret during the game of chess. She intended to use these 10 or so stones as bait. Of course, the opponent may not be willing to follow her pace in chess, but no matter what, her arrangement was now playing a role. Because they were all eminent monks of Buddhism, even if these 10 ascetic Zen chess pieces couldn't achieve a reversal of victory, Heaven's Choice Buddhism would not be able to end the battle quickly if they knew everything. They were all from the same sect and origin, and those Buddhist twists and turns were something that could be seen through at a glance. It wouldn't be a problem to stabilize the defense. The rest was up to Qing Xian. Hopefully, Xiaoyi's 5 rings friend wouldn't disappoint everyone. Chapter 1436. Everyone was on tenterhooks. Only a certain guy on the chessboard was doing nothing and was not worried at all. He suddenly remembered something. It seemed to be very important. Ever since the start of the war, another fragment of the universe had collapsed. He did not seem to have come into contact with this thing. The Tai fragment had collapsed just like that without a sound. He had not even heard of anyone who had obtained such a fragment, let alone seen it. Had it collapsed and disappeared? He needed every fragment, and he had never been too anxious about it. Every time the great Tao collapsed, he would always have the opportunity to see these things. However, ever since the collapse of the Tai fragment, it seemed that all his luck had disappeared. For more than 70 years, he had never heard of such things appearing anywhere. Could it be that they had all been picked up by others? He had never heard the blue sky 5 rings. As for Zhou Xian, he had not had the time to go out. This situation was very normal in the whole of Zhou Xian. Ever since the invasion of Heaven's Choice, no one had gone out of the bounded domain. It was also impossible to find. What he was considering now was whether the ruins of the End's cave true world had any remaining fragments. He had come into contact with this innate spiritual treasure before. He had sold fragments of the great Tao to it before. Would it still recognize him? Just as his thoughts were running wild, the chessboard suddenly glowed brightly. Zhou Xian was the first to succeed in killing the great white dragon. Since the black pieces on the chessboard could no longer be reversed, and there were only a few free white pieces, it was decided that the white pieces lost. The Yin gods of Heaven's Choice were unwillingly kicked out of the chessboard space. The remaining 140 Yin gods of Zhou Xian began to cross the boundary. At this moment, the human realm was still undecided. The immortal realm was still entangled. The immortal realm was still stagnant. The Heaven's Choice players sighed and admitted defeat. The direction of the wind had changed, not only for Zhou Xian, but also for Heaven's Choice. Every force was considering how to deal with such a change. Under the trend, if they did not change, they would lose. In the previous games between the two sides, most of them followed the same strategy. Zhou Xian entered the game independently by going up, while Heaven's Choice entered the game independently by going up. Zhou Xian made this choice because the cultivators of his own sect were more cooperative with each other. Tianze chose this because there were enough Shanghua cultivators. No matter what, he could exhaust Zhou Xian to death. If one Shanghua failed, he would send another. With the opponent injured, how many rounds could he last? The actual situation was indeed as such. Other than the 10,000 Buddhas worshipping heaven, who was indeed very strong and could withstand 3 formations, the other Zhou Xian upper sects only had the strength to withstand 1 formation, such as the Huangting sect, the human sect, and the current carefree travel sect. In fact, there were also other considerations behind this kind of individual battle. For example, how would they cooperate with each other after mixing together? How much effort did he put in? How was he going to talk about his merits and rewards? It was also related to the honor of the upper country and countless other issues that could not be brought to the table. This was the tradition of Taoism. For a special group of cultivators, it was very difficult to make them so close to each other that they did not consider their own losses and future distribution of benefits. After all, They were not a group of farmers who did not have high expectations. In a field battle, such a way of fighting was courting death. There was no cooperation. However, in this way of determining victory and defeat in a game of chess, the Taoists stubbornly insisted on the old-fashioned way that they had persisted for millions of years. In any case, they would not be at a disadvantage to Heaven's Choice because Heaven's Choice had enough Shangwa cultivators. Zhou Xian was the first to change. It was not because they were more innovative, but because they had no other choice. If they did not change, they could only be eliminated one by one. Even if the remaining upper sects were the strongest, they would only win a few more rounds. The strongest Shangwa cultivator of Heaven's Choice had also not entered the field. This was the way of the Taoist competition. First, the shrimp soldiers and crab generals, then the vanguard generals, and finally the commander-in-chief. Fortunately, Heaven's Choice had a few flexible yang spirits. Under the push of white eyebrows and Xian, and under the stimulation of 2 consecutive victories, the attitude of the remaining 3 sects, including Qingwei, finally relaxed. Firstly, there were indeed benefits to doing so. Secondly, it had formed a brilliant general trend in the entire Zhou Xian. It was impossible for Heaven's Choice to tolerate another failure. They would inevitably gather strong people to invade. At that time, the several major battlefields would no longer be so calm. It was very difficult to rely only on Xiao Yu and Taixin sect. New forces had to be added. The remaining upper sects finally sat together and began to discuss the issue of the coalition forces. Xiao Yu, Taixin, Zhonghuang, Qingwei Immortal Sect, Yuan Shidongjin, and Bitter Zen Temple. For a chess game of 2,000 people, there was a lot of manpower. The key was how to choose, how to weigh the pros and cons. Should they set up a team or multiple teams? How to cooperate? Who would preside? There were countless problems that needed to be discussed and solved. For these, they had to immediately come up with a plan. The Heaven's chosen people from the outer space were also gathered for a meeting. Like Immortal Zhou, because of the current situation, they had no choice but to sit together and begin to discuss the key to breaking through this situation together. Although they did have far more manpower than Zhou Xian, it was impossible for them to continue like this indefinitely. The spies in the domain had already spread the news that the people of Zhou Xian had begun to completely integrate. This meant that in the next chess game, they would always have to face the most powerful part of Zhou Xian's strength. The strength of one upper country was no longer enough to deal with it. The integration of Heaven's Choice was imperative. Compared to the people of Zhou Xian, the integration of Heaven's Choice was more difficult. Buddhism accused Taoism of not having the spirit to forge ahead and not giving their all. Taoism complained that Buddhism bullied the weak and feared the strong. They did not have good results against the powerful upper sects of Zhou Xian. In fact, deep in their bones, they were full of distrust for each other. They all wanted to preserve their strength and let the other party fight against Zhou Xian. In this kind of chess game, there was a big difference between giving their all and not giving their all. If they did not give their all, the losses in a game of chess would only be 10 to 20%. Most of the losses would be in the Yuanian class. But if they fought to the death and did not retreat, many light injuries would become serious injuries. Serious injuries would lead to death, and the losses would increase exponentially. Buddhism looked at Taoism, and Taoism looked at Buddhism. They all wanted to use less effort to take advantage of the situation. They each had their own ulterior motives. Under such a premise, there was the recent situation where Buddhism saw that the Yin spirits of the demon realm were defeated and did not bother to fight on the primordial spirit battlefield. There was no end to the accusations, because in reality, both sides did not intend to form an alliance, because each of them had enough strength to form their own elite team. When the number of people reached a certain limit, there was not much meaning in having more people join. Anyway, they only needed to choose 2,000 people. It was more likely that because of their bad relationship, they would ruin the game of chess. Heaven's Choice had 9 upper countries left. Taoism had 7 upper countries left. They were still far stronger than Zhou Xian. Then, In fact, they only lacked a constraint to urge both sides to give their all. In the cultivation world, what could stimulate the potential of a force the most? It was not an oath, but destruction and benefits. Of course, they were not on the verge of destruction. So, the only thing that could make everyone sit down and talk about was benefits. Chapter 1437. P.S. I'm not in a good state. Old Fallen was promoted last month, but I feel that this plot isn't very satisfactory. It's a little exaggerated. It's not just the book, it's also the person. Give me some time to adjust. The quality of the book speaks for itself. Old Fallen is an honest man. To be honest, I need to slow down and find a rhythm. Writing novels will always encounter such situations. My mind is distracted, and I have no inspiration. It's like a severe hemorrhoid patient shitting after eating spicy crayfish. Thank you for your support. Have a good dinner. Taoist Liang sat upright and said seriously, Zhou has 3,000 continents, 9 of which are continents. Why don't we make a bet? Monk Howda closed his eyes and focused. Ow! Taoist Liang already had a plan. Previously, we won 4 rounds. Taoist school won 2 rounds against Huangting Human Sect, and Buddhist school won 2 rounds against Wanyin Thousand Buddha. Then, let's make an agreement. If Heaven's Choice enters Zhou, we'll each take the upper sects under our name and their subordinate continents. Taoist school will take Huangting Human Sect, and Buddhist school will take Wanyin Thousand Buddha. The remaining 5 continents will belong to whoever takes them. What do you think? Howda smiled. Zhou has 5 sects left. Among them, Xiaoyao Pass is especially difficult. They've already become a de facto alliance. Therefore, this pass will be the most costly since the war began. I think that if we win this round, we'll get Xiaoyao Travel and Taixien. After that, we'll take turns and rely on our luck. Sure, the 2 of them clapped their hands and made an oath. This kind of bet was full of variables. If they wanted to take more territory in Zhou, they had to bleed more. Daoist school made this suggestion because it was their turn next round. If they worked harder, they could get 2 continents and more than 600 continents in one go. That would be a great advantage. Buddhist school didn't care. In fact, they looked down on Taoist school. If they could win this round, they would suffer heavy losses and weaken the strength of Zhou. Buddhist school could finish the battle. Everyone had their own thoughts. As for the next 4 rounds, under Zhou all-out effort, there probably wouldn't be any top forces left to participate in the heaven and earth chessboard. It would be much easier. Both of them had a good plan. As for who would end up tricking who, it would all depend on their own strength. At the very least, this method would allow both sides to go all out without holding back. This time, both sides were finally serious. Lu Xiaoyi didn't like this kind of battle. There was no end to this kind of fight. Fortunately, Bai Mei and the others had changed the rules. Otherwise, if they were to fight for another 70 years without being able to leave the realm, wouldn't they be annoyed to death? The only good thing about this was that because of the frequency of the battles, he could test out his newly comprehended sword skills without restraint. He also had a stable period of time to improve his cultivation as soon as possible. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had the opportunity to fight. Kawa treated him like a nuclear warhead and would not use him easily. This was trust and loneliness. It had been 200 years since he became a monarch. The Tai fragment had fallen for more than 70 years. Thinking about it carefully, his greatest gain in personal strength was the 100 years he spent in the Sword Tao steel. Now that he had mastered the Xinyuan scabbard, it seemed to be very fulfilling. However, he vaguely felt that the great fame he gained on the battlefield was not enough to make up for his mediocre personal strength. If he wanted to reach the strength of the Crow ancestor, this speed was still a little slow. However, he didn't know how he could speed up. He knew a little about Go. He knew that there was no such point in Go that could play the role of one piece to defeat another piece. The closest thing was to fight for the key position where others couldn't defeat him, and that would lead to changes. In a cultivator's game of Go, The tiger form was a very awkward defensive form. In a mortal's game of Go, the only way to deal with the tiger form was to pounce on it after making preparations, resulting in a calamity. However, in a cultivator's game of Go, the tiger form could brazenly pounce on it, leaving one helpless. Such a change had changed the game of Go beyond recognition. It had long since broken away from the concept of normal Go. Kawa used him correctly because he was not a pawn here. He couldn't keep pouncing. He only had one chance to use it, and he had to use it on the edge of the blade. In the Go game of 4 realms, this was the only place that limited the ability of an individual cultivator. No matter how great your ability was, you could only break one eye and kill one piece and one dragon. This was also the most variable realm among the 4 realms. The Heaven's chosen people were not fools. They had lost 2 games in a row in the demon realm, which made them realize the advantage of Zhou Xian in the demon realm. How would they deal with it? Lu Xiaoi didn't go to Kawa. He knew that as a bad Go player, he was not qualified to make any suggestions. Whether it was in the 5th ring or in the current Zhou Xian, he couldn't reverse the situation with his own strength, unless he was now the Sun Spirit. Qing Xian was still teaching him about Go. Both of us appeared in a battlefield where we killed a big dragon. Of course, we would win, but you have to understand that there are many big dragons in Go. They are separated and independent of each other. You can win a big dragon, but it doesn't mean you won the final victory. So it's very appropriate for us to separate. If we have an advantage in both areas, it's very difficult to lose. Just like last time, the opponent was defeated by more than 30 pieces. He had no more pieces. Lu Xiaoi was too lazy to think about this. It was too complicated. Swordsmen shouldn't be worried about this. This Zhou Xian really makes people speechless. Didn't a group of yang spirits and primordial spirits think of directly solving the problem with high-end combat power? If it was the 5th ring, who would pay too much attention to this completely unpredictable demon realm? The heavy burden must be placed on the yang spirit, then the primordial spirit. Try to solve the problem at the top 2 levels. Qing Xian's heart was filled with sorrow. The biggest difference between a Dao battle and a field battle is that one has rules and the other has no rules. Heaven's Choice has the ambition to lead the main world's cultivation world, but it doesn't have the courage to break all the bottles and jars. Its future achievements will be very limited. Lu Xiaoi looked up at the starry sky. Through the rolling clouds, he seemed to be able to see Heaven's Choice's banner fluttering in the wind. But he knew that under such majesty, there was a huge difference between Taoism and Buddhism. There were only 3 possibilities for such a difference to fully manifest. The 5th Ring's army sent reinforcements. Unfortunately, they only sent reinforcements to 2 spies. The Heaven's Choice continent had internal strife. Unfortunately, the most troublesome orthodoxies had already been expelled from the continent. The last thing they were doing now was to never retreat and never give up in this game. It had to be this game, because if they couldn't win this game, Heaven's Choice would feel that their hopes were getting dimmer and dimmer. Because there were still 4 more games, the road ahead was long. If it was only Qing Wei or ascetic Zen's resistance at the end, they would feel regret in their hearts. Only when Heaven's Choice saw that victory was in sight would they erupt with greater enthusiasm. Of course, Qing Xian also understood this logic. As long as they can hold on for 2 more games, Heaven's Choice Taoist Buddha will place a heavy bet and send out all their elites. If they can hold on for another 4 games, most of Heaven's Choice's elites will be eliminated, and their strength level will begin to decline. Based on my understanding of Heaven's Choice, they won't hold on until the end. As the saying goes, if they can't use up all their strength, they can only consider retreating. At most, they will have to fight another round of Taoist and Buddhist alliance. If they still lose, the grudges between Taoists and Buddhists will no longer be controlled. They will blame and push the blame to each other. At this time, they will be more wary of each other than they are of us. 5 games, at most 5 games. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.